So today we're going to be speaking with Brett Cooper. She's one of the most prominent Gen Z political commentators who's quickly grown an audience of more than 2.5 million through her outspoken opposition to the woke agenda with the Daily Wire. I guess you might also know her as the female Ben Shapiro.
What surprised me most about this episode was just how shocking her story was and how that led to her beliefs today.
I was emancipated at 15 and I moved to California to pursue acting about 10 years ago. I was acting in Atlanta first, lived in New York for a bit doing theater, then went out to LA for film and TV, and so I was working there professionally for about 10 years.
You're going to want to make sure to subscribe because next week we're also posting our discussions with Hassan Piker, who's on the complete opposite end of the political spectrum, and you don't want to miss out on that, so subscribe. And now with that said, a quick message from our video sponsor first.
By the way, man, now that we're off camera, I wanted to run by you my next business idea. It's basically like drop shipping, but for endangered animal species.
Cameras are still on.
Nobody steal my idea. Anyways, man, I'm still trying to figure out how to get it funded, and getting a bank loan has been an absolute nightmare.
Well, I mean, if simple and hassle-free funding is what you're looking for, then our sponsor Fund and Grow is able to help, and they're down below in the description.
Wait, Graham, down below where?
The description, Jack, not under the table.
But what about my endangered animals?
It's on you.
It's on you, man.
Look, Fund and Grow understands how difficult it could be for small businesses to get a loan. Bank loans are notoriously restrictive and full of red tape, but unlike a bank loan, Fund and Grow offers a 12-month membership where you could secure up to $250,000 of credit at 0% interest without giving up any equity in your company.
Fund and Grow already has over 4,000 4.9 star reviews, and I think that's because people are seeing genuine results from such fast and simple funding. And as a special offer for our listeners, Fund and Grow has prepared a business funding masterclass with 5 simple steps of how to get $250,000 in business credit.
Plus, as an exclusive bonus, you'll receive a $500 discount on their services.
So don't wait to fund and grow your business. Visit Fund and Grow today using the link down below in the description.
Oh, and also, guys, make sure to check out what's called icedcoffeehour.club because the .com was taken. We're actually doing this kind of right now. We're filming an episode just with Jack and I about business and behind the scenes and all that. So if you guys are interested, check out icedcoffeehour.club. Or the link is down below in the description. Go check it out. And now, let's get into the podcast.
Welcome back to the Iced Coffee Hour. I'm Brett Cooper. We are here in Nashville at our studios. I just made some iced coffee at my office for Jack and Graham. How do you think it is?
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah,
it's growing on me. The first few sips were, I would say, 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Now, 9.5 out of 10.
Awesome. I mean, I took a risk by putting the Chick-fil-A ice in there.
Yeah.
I knew it was going to melt faster.
It's bold. I like
didn't
it.
put it in yours, though.
No, I
wanted
got the
better
regular
for you.
ice. Mine's great, though. I put hazelnut in this. It's good. 20-cent iced coffee.
I love that.
So,
Cheers, guys.
Cool.
Cheers.
Let's
Thank
go
you
ahead and
so
do
much
it.
for doing this.
Yes,
we really
I'm so
appreciate
excited.
Imagine you just start choking on it, Jack.
We came all the way here
Yeah, we
to
did.
Nashville for
Yes.
you, and you were
Yeah.
so gracious. This entire set, you guys set it up. Extremely appreciative of it. I feel like we can't not mention what just happened. We went to
Yeah.
go tour some homes. You and Graham were like filming because
Yep.
you're looking to buy a house. We can talk about that later. And while you were filming, just after we arrived at the house, there was some banging, loud banging.
Yeah.
I thought Jack had fallen.
Yes.
He
No
thought
joke.
Jack had fallen. He thought I had slipped down the stairs. And no, I didn't
Jack was
fall.
about to walk up the steps. I was like, oh, crap, he fell.
I was,
Yeah.
yeah. He thought I fell, but actually what happened was a huge limb off of a tree fell over, crashed over, probably totaled
Three cars.
three cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was freaky. It was like your
Yeah.
entire crew's cars.
So we have a tornado warning all day today, but the storm we thought was going to be over, obviously. So we were going to cancel the video because we weren't even sure because it was storming. We're like, should we even go out there? And then it was so sunny. So yeah, it was wild. I'm grateful that everybody's okay though. It works out better for my video.
I get excited for this weather, though. I have to say, like, when it's windy like that, it was raining earlier. I was so excited. I told Jack earlier, like, it's supposed to, there's supposed to be lightning and thunder.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I was looking forward to that.
Extreme
maybe we'll
conditions
just-
are the best. I grew up in like Ventura, which is a very temperate
Yeah.
place. And whenever I see extreme temperatures or extreme winds and stuff like that, it just excites me because it's so normal there.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing.
Yeah.
Very
It's very
fortunate.
fun.
So.
Well, tell us a bit about your story.
Yeah.
I first found you, I think, on Twitter.
'Kay.
It was the female Ben Shapiro.
As
And I
most
saw the
people see.
resemblance, and I thought, okay, you guys are related somehow. To clear the air, you guys are not related.
We're not related, although you gave me the great idea that we should do a DNA test
Just
just
test
to
it.
see if there's any
There might be
connection.
something there. Yeah.
I mean, because I didn't see it. I think it's the eyebrows, but I really don't know. We should actually do a side-by-side, but I've seen it in some photos.
But the mannerisms, too, are, like, very similar.
Yeah.
I would say so, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
didn't grow up watching Ben. So that's one, like, I don't think I adopted it because of that.
Sure.
I was like a hardcore, like, Michael Knowles fan. I loved, like, Candace before
wow.
coming here, but I would listen to Ben and I knew who he was, but I wasn't somebody who religiously watched his show. And so a lot of people, have said, oh, you're right wing. You probably, like, grew up watching Ben. Like, that's why you talk. I'm like, literally no, we just speak very, very quickly and talk with our hands a lot, apparently. But no, so yeah, I am a Daily Wire now. I host the comment section, was not hired because of any relation to Daily Wire, even though many people think that. But I am originally from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then I moved to California to pursue acting about 10 years ago. I was acting in Atlanta first, lived in New York for a bit doing theater, and then went out to LA for film and TV. And so I was working there professionally for about 10 years.
How did you get into acting?
So I was deathly shy as a child.
Okay.
And my brother's high school was doing a production of The Wiz, which is like an adaptation of The Wizard of Oz. And they needed the siblings of some of the kids at school to be like the munchkins at the end of the show and like to stand, like do a couple of songs and then come out and be like cute and tiny. I think I was 5 at the time. No, 5 or 6. Deathly shy. My mom knew some people that were working, on the show. My brothers were not into theater whatsoever. And she was like, this is the opportunity to get my kid like over this. Cause I would not talk to people. And this was like something that she was actively working on. My mother is incredible. She was a very, very intentional parent. And so she knew I was very shy. So she would, stand outside of a gas station, make me go inside with a $5 bill and buy something. She would watch me like go up with, to the counter with a candy bar and have to talk to the person.
Why were you
something
shy?
like that.
Do you remember like the reason? Was it nervous of strangers?
Not really. I don't really know. I just think I was uncomfortable. Not to go in a totally different direction, but one of my brothers died when I was 5 years old. And so I think, that totally blew up the dynamic of my family. And I think at a very young age, that was something I didn't really understand. I remember at one point, like we had a bunch of people at our house shortly after he died, like, bringing casseroles and that sort of thing. And I was literally like hiding in a cupboard.
Oh.
And I was just like, I didn't really know how to process it. My whole family was very chaotic. I didn't really know how to interact with people at school. After that, it was very, very defensive. And I think I just kind of shut down. Because at, 5 years old, how are you supposed to process anything like that? And I think my family was so concerned with, my older brothers who were, seemingly more impacted by it than I was. So I would say that is the root cause of it. Obviously, I don't have that issue anymore. I credit a lot of that to acting. So I think that was why, but she was very intentional with getting me out of my shell and making sure that, once she noticed that this was a pattern, she was like, I want to make sure that this is addressed. So she signed me up to basically do this show and was like, maybe she'll like it. I don't know. Never, did any theater herself, was never a stage mom, never wanted that. Thought it would be a one and done, and I fell in love with it. Like, I just came alive. I loved music. Even before that, I was already doing ballet, and I just loved performing, and I loved storytelling in any capacity.
Sure.
And then I just kept begging to do more shows. So I did a few other shows with the high school, just being like the, one of 10 siblings that would be on stage, like doing a little dance number. Did community theater. Auditioned for a few regional professional productions. My first professional job was singing with the Atlanta Symphony and Opera, and I was one of their like chorus kids and was paid to do opera basically at I think 8 years old. Started doing like long running regional productions. I did a production of Annie that I think ran for 4 months when I was 10 years old, and then got representation. So I had an agent and manager at the time. They brought
Whose idea was that? Because there's a big leap between doing
This was all
what
you.
you were doing and getting into that, like a manager.
Yeah. So with doing professional things, I just kept asking for more. And so, our community theater didn't really have a ton of productions where they would, have kids involved. And so I would say, like, where else could I audition? Like, where else can I go? And so we would, my mom and I would sit at the computer and I would find, okay, well, this one's an hour away. Let's try to do this.
So you'd go on the computer and find your own.
We would go together, yeah.
What did you like so much about it?
I loved the fact that I could tell stories to somebody else. Something that I've dealt with for a very long time is that I felt like I could not actually effectively communicate what I was feeling. I was like very, very bottled up, and I, credit a lot of that to my family. Not only did my brother die, my parents had a very, very messy divorce. Just grew up in a very, very turbulent home. And I think that acting gave me the outlet that I needed in order to express myself. And I loved telling stories. I loved being able to be somebody else for 2 hours.
It might have been a bit of an escape in a sense, of just like you zone out, you could be somebody else, tell a story, make people laugh.
The adrenaline rush of it. I loved connecting with an audience too. I mean, I did, TV and film for 10 years, but when I am on stage, it's like nothing else. Like the energy of having hundreds of people in the room and they are along the journey with you. And I think that's the beautiful thing about theater. So whenever I hear people being like, I don't really like musical theater, I don't like theater, I'm like, just try it. Because you're sitting in this room together as a community going through this like hour-and-a-half long journey together. And as the actor on stage, it's a much more demanding task because you can't really take breaks. It's not like, I screwed up that line, let me try it again.
Sure.
It's like you are in it for an hour and a half. The adrenaline rush is insane. You are outside of yourself basically for an hour and a half. And even as a kid, I think I needed that. And I just became a totally different person. And it broke me out of my shell. I had so much fun. Yeah, it was a big leap. So I started doing professional stuff and I had this one goal. I wanted to be Jane Banks in the Broadway production of Mary Poppins, which was currently on Broadway at the time. I think it was probably 10 or 11. I had seen the musical multiple times. I was like, that is what I want. I want to play that role. It is so fun. So then, and this is all sometimes people don't believe it, but like my mother did not want me to do this. She wasn't like actively going against it, but she was like, I'm not going to push you to do this. Like we live in Tennessee. My brothers were in college. She was dealing with a failing marriage. Like this was not the time to be like getting her kid into professional whatever. I wrote a letter to a manager who repped 3 of the girls that had been Jane Banks on Broadway. And I found him because I would actively watch interviews of like young women that were on Broadway, like anywhere from my age to like 15 years old. Like, how did they do this? How did they get to do that? And I saw this guy like for the interviews and he was their agent at the time, and then he became a manager. So I found where he was currently working and I wrote him a letter and I said, these are all the things that I've been in. I desperately want to be Jane Banks. And then he still has it, I think. But I did a drawing of myself in the Jane Banks outfit on a stage and I sent it to him.
Wow.
Like 100%. I'm somebody that like I will take any risk. If I can give one piece of advice to anybody my age, it's just ask. If you just write a letter, if you just like the worst that somebody can say is no, but at least you tried.
Right.
People are so damn terrified to just shoot your shot. It's like, please just go for it. Anyway, so I sent this letter and I got an email back and he was like, will you fly up to New York and meet with me? So I remember going to his tiny office in Manhattan and I sang a song and I did a monologue and he signed
How
me
old
on
were you
this
at the time?
I was 10 years old. So my mom flew off with me and she was like, this is insane.
What are her thoughts? Like you're flying to New York to meet with a guy who's repping these people on Broadway.
She did like, research about him and was like,
Sure.
where are we going into that kind of thing. But
Wait, were you sending this directly to him? Was she like the intermediary? Like you're giving it to her and she sends it to him?
yes, like we would go, like we went to the mailbox together and like sent it off.
Okay.
But I was the driving force behind all of it.
I bet she's thinking like, oh, this is cute. Let's just do this.
Exactly, yeah. And to her, parenting style, I don't think that she would have done this if my brother had not died. Her parenting style totally changed after my brother David's death. And she has made most decisions since then based on, especially in my youth, if she had known that David was only going to have 17 years, would she have said yes to doing this? So if, he had wanted to go pursue something, if he had wanted to travel to do some, he was an artist, if he had wanted to do some like crazy art program go, would she have said yes knowing that he only had 17 years? And so I'm the youngest and it totally changed her perspective for me. And so obviously I don't think that these were easy decisions to say like, all right, let me allow my child to go into this room and pursue these things. But I was so excited about it. I was so passionate. And,
Wow.
She and anybody in my family will be able to tell you that like my self-confidence, my personality, it totally just blossomed with being able to do performing.
But hold that thought, Brett. Of course, the Daily Wire is $100+ million company that probably spends millions of dollars on video production every year, but it really shouldn't cost that much to create high-quality content.
Like if you're looking to get started, one of the best ways that you could begin is with a software like our sponsor, StreamYard. StreamYard is a live streaming software that allows you to create high-quality content with the click of a button. All you need is a camera and an internet connection to be able to stream directly from your browser.
And one of my personal favorite features is that they allow you to multi-stream, which basically means that you can stream to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and more all at the same time.
I also really enjoy that StreamYard offers various analytic tools so that you can measure the success of every single one of your live streams, and you're able to see which platform is bringing in the most traffic. StreamYard is really one of the best ways to get started creating content without spending any money whatsoever, and they also offer a free package so that you can get started without any risk whatsoever.
Check out StreamYard today with our link down below in the description. On top of all of those incredible benefits, they've also just been an amazing supporter of the podcast, and they help us do what we do every Sunday for you guys. So it would mean a lot if you check them out with the link down below in the description. Thank you so much, StreamYard, and back to the podcast.
But yeah, I signed with this manager, and so I started auditioning for things on Broadway. I ended up getting the role of Jane Banks, and I was going to be coming in. I had to come back for one last meeting, and the girl who's currently playing the role, her contract was going to be up. And there's a thing on Broadway where if you are under the age of 18, you cannot be taller. I think at the time it was like you cannot be taller than 5'1", because from the back of the house they want to make sure that you look shorter than the adults that are on stage.
Wow.
So you need to look like a child. And I had a huge growth spurt over those 2 month period. So I came back. They measure you first thing when you walk in the door, and there's the audition height. And if you are taller than that, you can't audition. And then there's show height, where they will literally end your contract if you get too tall. And so I had surpassed both the audition height and the show height. And so that totally kicked me out of the running for any other Broadway show.
Doesn't that make you really critical of like your body at that age,
Yes.
where you're just like,
I
I'm
hated
not
it.
good enough?
Like I would stand there and I would like
Yeah.
punch myself
Right.
down. And I continued auditioning for a few months after that. Like there was the revival of Annie that was coming up. I was way too tall for Matilda. Matilda was on Broadway. Billy Elliot had just closed. This is all just a bunch of like theater nerd stuff. But there were a ton of shows that had kids in them at that time, and I literally could not audition for any of them.
How tall were you?
I was like 5'2", I think so. I was
Okay, it was, like,
barely over,
Wow.
but I was 10 years old and 5'2". And so it was like, that was it.
Okay.
And so I had this whole management team, and I remember going into a meeting and sitting down, and they were like, so you can go home to Chattanooga and wait until you're 18. You can wait 8 years. And then you can start auditioning for Broadway again. You can just keep doing the regional theater you're doing. You know, we'll stick with you. Or if you wanted to, you could go out to LA and try film and TV. And my mom was like, absolutely not. Like, she's from California. We talked about this in the car. She spent most of her adult life in California prior to moving to Tennessee. She just wanted a different pace. And she was like, I'm not going. Every time that she's left California, she said, I'm never coming back, even though she was born in LA. And I begged. I was like, please, like, I can't just sit at home and do this. And so I started auditioning via tape. And so she was like, let's just see if there's any bites. Like, let's try you doing film. Let's get you in a film class. See if you even like doing this before we literally send you to LA to do something. I still loved it. I started getting callbacks for things. And so we rented out a friend's apartment in LA. And my mom and my dad and I drove across the country, did Route 66. And I lived there with her for 3 months. And I did like every, casting director workshop. I did all of these acting classes. I was auditioning nonstop, did a few commercials. I got a LA management and agency. And then from that point on, for the next 4 years, I would spend 6 months at home in Tennessee and then 6 months in Los Angeles. So I would go in the fall and then the spring in LA and spend the rest of the time at home. And I loved it. It was it was absolutely crazy. And I feel very, very fortunate that I got the chance to have a professional career at a young age. And I don't think that that's I don't think that that's something that many people would want.
Yeah.
And I definitely sacrificed a lot for it, but I loved it so much.
Well, tell us about your schooling at that time.
Yes.
Because how do you balance the two?
So I was in public school from kindergarten to third grade. My mom pulled me out in third grade because my reading level was above that of my class. She had a meeting with my teacher and said, could I give you some books for Brett to read so that, she stays interested and is not falling behind or anything like that. It's not getting bored, not being complacent. The teacher said, I just have too many students.
Yeah.
I can't do it. So my mom pulled me out and she created the curriculum up until 6th grade.
So you were homeschooled from
Homeschooled.
3rd to 6th. Okay.
Mhm.
What
And
was
then-
that like for you? Like being pulled out,
loved
you liked it.
How are you
loved it.
making friends through this whole process? Because especially if you're like living in 2 different states and then being homeschooled, how are you meeting people?
When we were still in Chattanooga and I had not gone out to LA yet, I was doing ballet multiple times a week, and then I was a competitive gymnast, so I did that multiple times a week. I was in a choir, so I met people through that. Every show that I did, I would make friends through that. Friends in the neighborhood that I still knew from public school. That is like the primary question that anybody who's homeschooled gets. And some people, hate it because their parents did not go out and find them extracurricular opportunities and did not find them ways to be socialized. I literally would not change my experience for the world. I had the most diverse group of friends because rather than having, one group of people that you go through, K through 8, then you go into high school or whatever, and it's, the same demographic from that same neighborhood. I was friends with people of all different ages, on my gymnastics team from all different parts of town, boys and girls. I had to interact with adults constantly because I was, dealing with my ballet teachers and my gymnastics coaches, and spent a lot of time, wherever my mom was volunteering or my dad was working, like I would go and do school at his office. And so I was constantly interacting with his secretaries and, his coworkers. So at a very young age, I became adept at socializing with adults, which I think is so beneficial, and it made me a lot more confident and, willing to network and start working at a young age. And so I remember, being in high school and I wanted a side job. And so, I would be talking with my friends and say, I want to go, apply at this place. And they'd be like, you just go in and you talk to them? It's like, yeah, it's fine. And so I would go into Trader Joe's, drop off my resume, go to, Lush Beauty, drop off a resume. I was just so comfortable with it. And then on top of that, with acting, you're constantly interacting with, casting directors, producers, writers, adult actors that you're working with. You're in a professional environment. You have to be able to work at that level.
Yeah.
With child actors, they will give you some grace for being a kid, but you also, they won't hire you if you're an idiot that's rolling around and being super immature. So you kind of have to up your game. So that is how I, socialized for those few years. And then I did an online private school. But in this online private school, you could still customize your curriculum. That's something my mom cared very much about. Prior to investing in real estate and then being a stay-at-home mom, she was a textbook publisher with W.W. Norton. So she was deep into academia, knew what she wanted me to be reading, knew what textbooks, she wanted me to be reading. So with my teachers, she would work at the beginning of the year and we would all go over the curriculum. And it was usually tailored to things that I was very interested in. I'm a super, super heavy reader. I love literature. And so rather than reading, 6 books in a semester, I was reading 30 maybe. And
what sort of books were you reading?
Just classic literature,
really?
Primarily. Yeah.
Okay. And
every week was a different, we would do American literature. We do it from this time period. We would do British literature. I think I read Jane Eyre when I was 10 years old for the first time.
Oh my gosh. Here I was reading Goosebumps. I love those books though.
I mean, I had my Nancy Drew phase. I think I've read all 55 Nancy Drews, about 3 times.
Sure.
But I had a very, very academically rigorous upbringing, even though I was also working. And it all sounds very, very intense, but I had so much fun. And it was worth for me, having to time block, I guess, and time manage my school if I was going to be on set. And I would, work on it at night or, on set you usually have a tutor. And so they would make sure that I was going through all of my schoolwork and I would have my laptop there and be doing things. And that's what I did, until graduation, except for 1 year. I went to a normal public school in Atlanta for my 9th grade year.
What was that like?
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. I asked to go. My friends were going to this performing arts high school. And I knew these friends from doing theater in Atlanta. And I went and I saw one of their school productions. I was like, this is insane. It was called Pebblebrook High School. It's one of the best public performing arts high schools in the country. And I looked at my mom and I was like, I want to go here. This is insane. I want to try to be normal. I want to take a break from LA for a year. I'll still audition, but I want to go see what this is like. And I thought it would be really, really cool. I hadn't sung in a long time, and so I could be a vocal major and, do all the musicals. So I auditioned. We got a rental house in Cobb County, Atlanta, and I went for a year, and within 2 months, I knew it was not for me.
What'd you dislike about it?
I did not like that my time was dictated by somebody else, basically. So I felt like I was so unproductive, which seems absurd for a 14-year-old to be saying in 9th grade. I was actually, I think, 13 in my 9th grade year, because I graduated college at 19, I think, 19, 20. So I think I was 12, turning 13 my freshman year of high school. And I hated that for 6 hours of the day, I was sitting in a classroom when I knew, because I'd been homeschooled for so long, I could get all of this work done in a 2-hour span. The busy work I didn't need to do. I didn't like having to watch other people's hands being held. I didn't like the disruptions in class. And then I would stay late for dance rehearsals, musical rehearsals, auditions, and that sort of thing. And then I would go home, and because I didn't feel academically challenged, I went to my counselor and I said, can I do online AP classes? So my entire time there, I was doing a normal class load at school. I stayed an additional hour afterwards. If you were a magnet performing arts high school or a magnet performing arts student at the school, you stayed an additional hour and did a dance class, a vocal class, or whatever. And then I would often have rehearsals afterwards. Then I would come home, I would do my homework, and then I would do AP classes.
Why couldn't you have just dropped out?
I know.
It seems silly to me that you were homeschooled for so long, go for 2 months. I would just say, let's go back to homeschooling. What kept you there? Why
because I made a commitment, and I wanted to see it through. Yeah.
Well, you moved your entire parents.
But
Yeah,
just because you made a decision doesn't mean you have to commit. What's the benefit of committing at that point? I would just say,
I guess following through and being able to say that I did it.
Okay, sure.
I made this commitment with myself. I wanted to try it. I also wanted to be able to say later down the line, I went to a public school, I tried it. And I know both sides of the story. And I had also kind of fed into the assumption that being homeschooled made you weird, and that I was off by that. And I wanted to see if normal high school was like the movies basically depicted it. I wanted the Letterman jacket. I wanted to go to homecoming, do all that stuff. it just wasn't for me.
Yeah, sure.
But it also was because I did all those extra AP classes, it was one of the best academic years for me. At 13 years old, I don't remember how many people were it was a huge school. I think it was maybe over 2,000 people were in my freshman class. I ended up first in my class at the end of the year. And so I was really, really proud of that. And
did you have friends throughout the process?
I'm still friends with them.
Wow.
Yeah, but I didn't. First semester, I knew that it really wasn't going to be for me, but I wanted to make the best of it. I did every musical. I auditioned for everything. I tried to, basically suck the marrow out of life as much as I could have. But by the second semester, I felt so tied down and so unhappy that I hated who I had become. I felt like I was not being a good friend. The people that I had loved in the first semester, I didn't feel like I was treating them as well. I just felt very distant. I wanted to get out. And I was so much happier when I made the decision to leave. And now I'm, still friends with them. And we stay in contact, and they went through all, 3 years. But it was the best decision, I think, for me to go and learn that.
Yeah.
I think it forced me to kind of realize that what I was doing was the right thing for me. And it was a challenge for sure, because it was a different learning environment, forced me to adapt. So
I remember seeing homeschool kids as a kid, and they were always kind of weird.
Yeah.
That would be my biggest concern of ever doing homeschooling, is feeling like they're in a bubble, that they don't get the true experience. They're not going to be out there kind of forging their own path. What are your thoughts about that?
I think it comes down to the parents and how you dictate it, because obviously if you keep your kid just inside and you don't facilitate any other kind of extracurriculars, they're not going to benefit from it. But the benefit of homeschooling is the opportunities and the freedom and the flexibility that you do have. So if you are in, like my online school that I went to, I didn't have to finish all my classes by a certain period. I had 9 months. And so if I wanted to get everything done in 2 weeks, I could have. If I said, hey, I'm shooting this movie, I'm not going to be able to do this for 3 months, I could pick it up later.
Yeah.
With home, I didn't go to we tried a co-op for a bit where you would go, Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 2 hours in the morning, and you would get graded. Didn't really love that. The opportunities weren't great in Chattanooga. But I had so much flexibility, so I was able to do everything that I was interested in. I took art classes. I did gymnastics. I volunteered. And that was only because I had the time to do it. I was not, in school until 3 p.m. I spent so much time with my family. I spent so much quality time with my brothers. My relationship with my mom is one of the things that I'm most proud of.
Yeah.
And we really developed that over, that period. I also think I inherited, and this could be a benefit or a drawback, depending on whether people like me or don't like me. I inherited a lot of her values because of that, because I spent so much quality time with her, that she was the one who raised me, not a teacher. And I think that is so important, because when you look at the statistics of how much time kids are spending with their parents these days, I think that the Department of Labor, it's 35 minutes a day.
That's it?
Yeah.
What age?
What is it? We got to figure out the parameters. Of what
so I need to look at what the actual age is. But when you remove bathing, making dinner,
watching a movie together,
watching, that kind of thing, that's not,
that doesn't count.
Actual
because that's a quality time when you
Okay.
are face to face with your kid, bonding, doing an activity where you are interacting, not just sitting in front of a screen, or not oh, my kid's in the same room but farther away.
Sure.
But that's an average of 35 minutes a day. I think that was in 2021 was when I saw that stat. That was not the case for me. I was with them all the time, whether I was at my dad's office doing work, whether I was with her, whether I was with grandparents. I spent so much time with family, and I'm very lucky that I, love my family. But that's something that I also, do not take for granted at all. But I think that that's something that parents should be concerned about. And obviously, depending on your, financial situation, your job situation, might not be possible. And obviously you do need to consider, the education system, the public schools and that sort of thing in your area. But it's really taking into consideration, who is raising your kid at the end of the day? Who is spending that, whether it's the media, whether it's teachers. And my mom didn't homeschool me because of that, but I think that is a result of this. She was never pulling me out of school because of an ideology or anything like that. It was simply because she wanted a better education for me. But by default, I think I got a really incredible, physical education, but also emotionally, the interpersonal side of it.
But why do you feel like there's sometimes a stigma? Let's just say if the homeschool kid goes out into the real world, they go crazy. They start partying, they do drugs, they get in trouble. Why do you think that is, and what held you back from that?
Again, I think those are usually the kids that have not been pushed out in the world at a young age, have not been able to take advantage of the opportunities that you can usually have when you are homeschooled. And it's interesting because the recent stats show that homeschoolers, at least in high school, going into college, drink less, do less drugs, are not partiers. And I think we're getting better at that. Also, academically, our scores are off the charts. We're getting into better schools. The Ivy Leagues seek out homeschoolers these days. And so again, it goes back to the parents. If you are making this decision, you are not only taking on your children's academic life, you are taking on their social life. And you have to remember that. Because just keeping them in their house, that is why.
Sure.
It's because they do not have a social interaction. They do not have a social life outside of the home. And obviously, spending time with mom and dad is great, but you have to be around other people. And so I think that, you see one side of homeschooling, and that is kind of the loudest group, and people oppose it for that group. But I also, the smartest people I know in my life are homeschoolers, because they, advanced so quickly in their academic careers because they started working at a very young age. They're incredibly self-reliant. And I think those are some of the benefits. But again, it does go back to the parents. And so if you want to homeschool, but you are not in a position to take all of that on, it's then maybe they would be maybe better off in some other school. And if you are concerned about academics, try maybe a public school or a private school.
Sure.
But it's really, I understand the stigma because of that. But I would also push back on people saying that homeschoolers are inherently weird. Because I definitely was weird. I was a total nerd. I was a theater kid. I had a career. And I look at kids that are normal these days, and I'm so glad that I'm not one. I'm very glad that I was not partying. I'm so glad that I did not succumb to the same peer pressure that a lot of my friends who, grew up in the normal school system did. I was totally oblivious to all of that. I didn't go through it. I've had people say, you didn't get bullied, so you haven't been knocked around. No, hell yeah, I've been knocked around. I had an entire acting career, where I was told no 99% of the time. My brother died. My father, has serious mental health issues. I had enough, happen in my life, basically. So I don't think that you are completely, exempt from bad things happening or being toughened up. So I guess that those are some of my pushbacks against it. But obviously, there's a reason why that stigma exists. There obviously are homeschoolers that, have come out that way.
Sure. So what happens when you left public school?
Yes.
Where did you go after that?
Went back to LA, was still splitting my time between LA and Chattanooga. Started doing film again. I think it was the next summer. I shot a Fox miniseries called Shots Fired. So I was living in North Carolina that summer doing a show. That fall, actually, I emancipated myself. So I was emancipated at 15.
Why?
Myriad of reasons. I was about to shoot the second season of a show. It had been picked up. We didn't have a lot of details yet, but it was supposed to shoot in Prague. And at the time, my parents were going through their very, very messy divorce. My oldest brother, this was mostly, in my opinion, due to the death of his twin, who's my brother, so I have brothers who are identical twins. And Reed, who is the surviving twin, watched David die. And he has, I don't think ever really recovered for that. I don't know if you can recover from watching.
Can we ask what happened? Is that...
Yeah, he had a cardiac arrest. So they were on the rowing machine, and he just had a cardiac arrest.
The rowing machine?
Was that an underlying heart condition?
We had no, we didn't
just
know.
at the gym?
Yeah, at school.
What?
Yeah.
At school?
Yeah. And the school didn't have defibrillators, and so they did CPR, but could not revive him. What we think is that he had something called long QT syndrome, but we're not sure. The autopsy really didn't bring back much. We didn't want to just spend a lot of time doing tests. But I mean, my whole family, it's crazy. We still really don't know, because Reed, who is his identical twin, has no signs of it, has never had any signs of it. And they are genetically identical. And so truly, the only one that has had a sign of it is me. Sometimes on my EKGs, because I do them yearly, something has popped up that's kind of weird, but nothing that's been alarming. But Reed has had no signs of it.
Oh my gosh.
But it's been 16 years since David's death now. And Reed spiraled years after that. So at the time, I mean, he left college and went to India for 4 years, did hard drugs, and came back totally different. It was his way of coping. My parents tried to keep him from going, held money over his head. My grandparents gave him money, and he ended up, going. And it was just a whole, obviously a lot of turbulence, I would say. And he really, really struggled when he came back, and then he had a psychotic break. So my brother is now, at this point when I'm 15, he is diagnosed schizophrenic.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that with a twin, because I hear a lot of the times that there is that connection between them. And I believe that.
Yeah.
I think it's a part of yourself is dying at the same time.
And so, when you're growing up, and there is, I don't know the psychological term for it, but therapists talk about it a lot, where you are, moving into adulthood. It usually happens around college age for us people in the modern age now, but where you break away from your parents. You start to see them as individuals rather than as parents. You differentiate yourself from your family. As you're creating your own family, you're creating new relationships, you're not living at home. twins have to go through that on another level with each other because they spend their entire lives, like Reed and David did everything together, were in the same exact class, lived in the same room, they went to boarding school, lived in the same room together, had the same group of friends, looked exactly the same. Throughout their entire life, David would wear red, Reed would wear blue. So my mom dressed them as a baby. They kept it up in high school, but it's like they were connected, looked literally identical. Friends couldn't tell them apart. They had not, at 17 years old, had not gone through that break. And so it was like literally this person instantaneously was ripped away from my brother. And he was at an all boys school. Oh, and so at 17 years old, had no outlet. He has often said to me, he was like, Brett, I cried once and I was fine. I promise. Like, it didn't impact me. And it's like, you're bullshitting us. Like, I know you did, and you don't need to do this for your friends. And so I think because he never actually processed it, it just, festered and festered and festered. And then he did a lot of drugs that literally changed his brain chemistry. Like, he would do things in India where he would wake up 2 weeks later in a totally different part of the country.
Are you serious?
Yeah. I mean, he's done probably everything on the books. Yeah. Came back, was continuing to abuse drugs, got him in front of doctors, and then refused to take medication for any. And, I have my own thoughts about, antipsychotics and antidepressants and that sort of thing. And I really believe that there are a lot of lifestyle and diet changes that people can make to help mitigate that. And he did not want to do any of that. He said, I don't have a problem. And it's like, you're literally having psychotic breaks in front of us. And so he was at the time on the street and he refused medication, and schizophrenics can often be violent. So my mom said, you cannot live with us. You cannot live with your younger sister. Unless you were on these meds, you need to figure something else out. So he was like, well, I can get drugs on the street. So for 2 years, he was homeless. And so I had this TV show that I was possibly going to Prague for. My parents were getting divorced. I got pulled into the divorce. At 15 years old, I should have been able to say, like, I don't want to have to split custody, whatever. And at the time, I was like, I have a career. I'm living in Los Angeles. My brother is a mess. I cannot be dealing with, like, my parents' stuff in Chattanooga right now. I should not be involved in it. I kind of felt like I started being used as a pawn in it, so I got a lawyer. It was not contentious.
You got a lawyer at 15?
Mm-hmm.
How did you do that?
Was it a publicly... Like they gave it to you?
No, I went and I found one in Chattanooga, so I did it in Tennessee.
I bet you just walked in with your resume and
yeah, it was like
hey, here I am.
I was still in LA at the time, but because I was a resident of Tennessee, my learner's permit was in Tennessee.
How do you pay for that? I imagine a lot of lawyers at that point would just do it pro bono.
Maybe in Los Angeles, it's very, very difficult to do because a lot of families will try to do that because it's easier to be an actor if you are not a minor because they don't have to pay the additional fee to have a tutor. You can work longer hours, that kind of thing. So a lot of parents and families and stage moms and that kind of thing will try to screw with the system and like get their kid emancipated to do it. I didn't want to deal with that, and I was still resident in Tennessee. So we had a couple of family friends. My mom actually helped me because I went to her and I said, I cannot be a part of this. Like, your attention is split between, Reed and, being at home in Chattanooga, and she was going to move Reed back to Chattanooga, and she was like, you're going to have to come. And I was like, I don't want to. I'm a professional. I literally have a career. Please just like, let me try to do this. And so she was like, okay. So once again, me like dragging my mom along for this journey. But I don't even remember, he was the father of a family friend of ours, and he was a family lawyer, and so it was a relatively, not a difficult process. But yeah, I brought my resume, showed the money that I was making, and he said, it's not consistent enough because acting's, ebbs and flows. So that was at the time when I got a job at Trader Joe's. So I was 15, got a job at Trader Joe's, worked there until 2021. I kept that job throughout all of my acting. Yeah, all throughout college.
How much were you making at 15?
$17 an hour.
That's really good.
That's fantastic.
Trader Joe's
was that
pays
base?
awesome money. Yeah, and you get full health care and all that. So I got my health care through them.
But how do they hire you at 15 though?
Because in California you can start working at 15. So I could get my own insurance because I was emancipated. So I started working there and I kept auditioning, and then I lived in LA for a summer while my parents were finalizing their divorce, just in our apartment by myself.
Yeah. What did your parents say about you getting emancipated? Did they have any thoughts on that? Did they try to stop you from doing that? Or were they like, well, you could make your own decisions? My dad was more concerned with it. My mom was on board because she did not want me to be involved in the divorce. Sure.
I won't get into details, but it was my dad who was... I'm not very close with him. It's kind of all water under the bridge now, but it's been a very, very difficult relationship. At the time, he was the one that was pulling me into it. And I think it was kind of a power move. And so I went to him and I said, this is unacceptable. And I said, I'm doing this because of the things that you are doing and the impact that you're having on our family. And I was like, I'm not going to blame my brother Reed right now, but I was like, I physically cannot be a part of this. So if it's not contentious, your parents can both sign. And if the judge agrees that it's okay, then it's okay. So that's ended up being what happened. So my parents both agreed on paper, and then it had to go to a judge. And then I was emancipated, so I was able to, live in Los Angeles. I worked at Trader Joe's. I kept auditioning. I kept doing, projects. I did a couple of movies. I did a few other, TV shows. Started going to community college because it worked better with my schedule. So I went to Santa Monica Community College.
Good school, by the way.
Yeah, it's a great school. It's has the best transfer rate of any community college in the country.
My parents wanted me to go to SMC.
It saves you money.
Yeah.
It was great.
I went to community college.
Really?
I loved it. Yeah, Ventura College.
See,
then
awesome.
UCSB, but Ventura College. Yeah.
I say I would not change it for the world. I feel like I got a better education at SMC than UCLA. 100%.
Honestly, I would probably agree with that.
Yeah.
With my community college experience.
Because
the classroom sizes are a lot smaller.
Yeah.
It's more intimate. And also a lot of the professors at community
they
colleges.
want to be there.
Yes, because it's more desirable to be a professor at a community college
Yes.
a lot of the times than the really nice
Why is
institutions.
that?
And at UCLA, you have to be doing research. It's a research university, and so most
Yeah,
professors
that's
are
another
there.
the continuing education or whatever
Yes,
it is. Yeah,
and
yeah.
so UCLA is known for its research, and so a lot of the professors there, are, writing their own books in the English literature department, working on their theses, that sort of thing. And at community college, they are there for the students. And again, I feel like the through line with my life is I was around a ton of different people, and so there would be people like me who were younger. There were people who were coming back, 30 years later, working on their education. I met the most interesting people. And in California, where it's very normal that people go to community college, there was not really a stigma. But I mean, truly, my education was better there.
So much better. And guess what? It was $7.
Yes.
$7 college.
$7 for a semester. Yeah. Yeah.
How?
There was a California bill.
What's the
that
point
passed.
of what?
You know what I'm talking about?
$7.
I used it, but it's only for the first semester.
Yeah.
The next semester, I think, was like 100 or something like
Why
that.
do they do
But if you
seven?
were an in-state, if you're
Make
an
it
in-state
zero.
student,
I think it's also your district has like a
Yeah.
community college or something. You have to go to the according to community college. Yeah. It
and
was
then if you
$7.
get academic scholarships on top of that, because community colleges make money by having the students there, and they want their stats to be higher. So if you're a really, really good student and you're coming here, they make it really desirable for you. So I
Wow.
saved so much money, and it's totally flexible because you don't have to be a full-time student. You don't
Like
have all
night
the
school and stuff
premiums.
like
Yeah,
that,
exactly.
yeah.
So I would do night classes or 8 a.m.s and then go audition in the middle of the day and then go work a 5 to 10 p.m. shift at Trader Joe's, and that was my life.
So you went from that, and then you transferred to UCLA.
Yeah.
Okay.
So 2 years in, I was a English major with a minor in biological anthropology at first, and then dropped that because at UCLA, if you are not already getting a BS, you have to do like chemistry and physics for all of those things. So I was like, no, not interested in that, but I love anthropology. And if I was more scientifically inclined, I would have probably tried to do some kind of double major, but I did not want to do chemistry, did not want to do physics. I just loved bio. And I love anthropology. Anthropology made more sense to me than any psychology or sociology class I've ever done in understanding basic human instincts and what we're wired to do. It's the perfect, I guess, explanation for how even men and women are totally different. We are literally wired different ways. But anyway, and so I did that for a bit, dropped that minor, and then was a film minor until the end. But I don't even think I finished up my film minor because I realized that I'd gotten to the end of my major, and it was in the middle of COVID. I was like, I don't want to be on Zoom anymore. I'm just going to dip. But I probably did not finish that minor because I went to the UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business, and they had a program where if you were an undergrad, you could go to their grad school and do a business program. So I did that during COVID. And then as COVID was wrapping up, I was, at least in California, I didn't really think I wanted to go back to acting. I didn't love the lack of control that I had as an adult. Growing up as a kid, it just was this crazy adventure, and it felt like this hobby that I happened to get paid for. I wasn't thinking about the money. I didn't see any of the money. It all went into a savings account, and then legally, with being a child actor, there's a thing called a Coogan account, and so a percentage of your money goes there. So, and my parents did not use any of the money. It just went into a savings account, so I used part of that to buy my first car and for some of my UCLA tuition. But I was never motivated by money because I wasn't getting a slew of American Girl dolls or anything like that.
Yeah,
it was just
sure.
it was so fun for me.
How much was in that Coogan account, by the way?
Oh gosh.
Do you remember? Because that accrues. Now, can you invest
does.
within the account?
I don't think you can invest within it. I don't
It's
even
just cash?
remember.
Okay.
It was like tens of thousands, nothing like crazy.
But that's
Isn't the
still
Coogan
for
account? It's like a certain percentage though. Of the,
Yeah,
it's
so
like
it's
15,
only
15 or so
I
percent.
I think it's 15%.
Yeah.
I don't remember
Minimum,
what it ended up
yeah.
being, and it doesn't accrue a ton of interest. It kind of just sits, but it's your legal protection in case you are in an environment where your parents are taking your money. They want to make sure that when you turn 18, you have something. And I think it's a great protection. So I don't remember what it, how exactly much it was, but I know I did my down payment for my first like Kia Niro and like bought it with that money and then paid some of my UCLA tuition with it. But yeah, so I graduated, and once the money part became a little more close to home for me, I was like, okay, I'm about to turn 18. This is a career. And I started thinking about like, whenever I get married and have kids, because that's always like the thing that I've wanted most is to be a mom. My mom is just an incredible example of, I think, what a mother can be. And she just dedicated her life to being a really, really engaged parent. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to like build humans. I think that's so cool. And I was like, I don't really want to be a parent and be in this unstable of an environment. And I really admire the people that are okay with doing that. But I also didn't like that at the drop of a hat, I could be told to fly to North Carolina. And it would be something like, okay, you have this audition at 4 p.m. today. Tomorrow you could be on a flight to Toronto and shooting this thing. You literally have no control. You have to say no to everything in your life. That was really hard for me as somebody that really values control and having autonomy over my life. I didn't love the fact that sometimes you might crush an audition and they'll be like, well, you don't really look enough like the person who's playing your father. You're too skinny, you're too fat. We've rewritten the role and you don't fit it anymore, so we're firing you on set. Or like, here you filmed the entire project. We don't think your role really reads anymore. We're cutting it. And so it's just like constant. And it's very, very normal, and it comes with it. So it was never something I really wanted to like try to change or combat. But it was like, these are all things that bother me. And even though I love storytelling, I think I can do this in another way. So I went into production. So I did multiple like producing internships. At the end, I was working for Big Beach Productions. They produced Little Miss Sunshine. Incredible. I mean, one of the best internships I ever did. I learned so much. But during COVID, we obviously went virtual. I hated that. And then during BLM and COVID, the entire industry just became so political. And my job became less about find good stories and more about, could you find a Native American story for us? Could you find a Black story for us? Like, rather than just reading scripts for the value in them, it was like, we need something that is like politically woke. We need to be on the cusp of this. And I understood it because that is what was making money at the time. That's what people wanted. And there was a lot of pressure. But I was like, okay, now I don't like this. Like, that doesn't feel authentic to me. So I did what every liberal arts confused graduate does, and I studied for the LSAT, and I applied to law school. So I did that also during COVID. I took the LSAT.
It's crazy you just decide on a whim, be like, no, I'm just going to take the LSAT now.
Yeah. And so I was still working, still doing all of that, and I went back and I got my old ACT tutor who also does LSAT stuff, and I called him. I was like, so, buddy, you want to work with me again?
Wow.
And so I studied for that for about 9 months, and then took that. Applied for all the California schools. I was aiming for Pepperdine because I thought value-wise I would be better
That's
there.
funny. That was the only college I applied to was Pepperdine.
Really?
Yep. And they said no.
I didn't
It
apply
was
there.
so I was devastated.
Really?
Actually. Yeah, I've told this
Were
story
you
before.
actually sad?
Yeah.
What were you applying
so
for?
I wanted. They I think had a really good business program. So I was like, I'm gonna go there for business. But I had terrible grades in high school, like really, really, really bad. A horrible SAT score. I thought I would wow them and just like write a great application, do a cool story, because I was really into like reef aquariums and I was working all through high school. And I thought like my resume.
Sounded like a homeschool kid.
Yeah, exactly. But I was like, I was promoted in high school as the assistant manager, not the assistant to the manager, but the
Nice.
assistant manager of this whole like reef aquarium place, and I loved it. I'd worked there, so I thought like I was gonna wow them, and I applied. And that day
Okay.
that they were sending out the acceptance letters,
Yeah.
I went to Disneyland, and I was at the Blue Bayou in Disneyland, pulling up the email from
Yeah.
the first gen iPhone. Okay.
Okay.
And I got the email in the morning, but I waited to open it at the Blue Bayou because I thought to myself, if I get in, we'll celebrate.
Yeah.
And if I didn't get in, we're at Disneyland. It's great. And I didn't get in.
Oh my God. The
Yeah.
only school you applied to.
The only one.
How did it feel? Walk us through your emotions.
At that point, because I had no backup plan. Well, first of all, I
Yeah.
didn't know how to pay for it. Like
Okay.
no one
That-
had.
It's so
so-
fucking expensive.
So I didn't.
Oh my God.
So in my mind, it was like $40,000 a year. I had no idea. Like no one in my family had money to pay for that.
Okay.
I think all of them
Well,
were
you were
like,
going to wow them with your reef aquarium, get a scholarship.
maybe get a
Exactly.
scholarship
Yeah.
or something,
Yeah, grants.
like that.
Maybe
Yeah.
start
Based
the
off that.
marine biology program
Yeah.
at
Right.
Pepperdine.
Yes. that's a
Exactly.
great idea.
Something like that. But yeah, I had no backup plan.
Okay.
And I thought maybe I could be a drummer. So because I was in a band as well in high school, and I thought, maybe I could do this drum thing, like maybe it'll work out.
Yeah.
But I think like a month or two after I ended up getting my real estate license, that was like my backup plan. Do that for a year, and then I could reapply.
Okay.
But that's when I was thinking about going to SMC during that time. Like maybe I just take a year in SMC, or I get my real estate license. And it was real estate license.
Well.
That is so funny, the dichotomy between Brett's,
Yeah.
growing up and Graham's growing up. It seems like Brett would pivot in any direction, just be like, success, success, success. And then Graham's like, well, like, I don't want it to be a drummer, but who knows? Like, yeah, that's cool.
I wanted to make money.
Worked out.
Yeah.
And I felt like,
I
remember, because we used to play shows.
think you made the right decision, because Pepperdine, you would have lost money.
Oh, yeah. Pepperdine would have been terrible.
Yeah.
Drumming would have been interesting, though, because there are now ways to make money as a drummer.
He is a good drummer.
Money.
He's a very good drummer.
I'm terrible.
Yeah.
But I would play shows on the Sunset Strip, like
Okay,
the Roxy and all those places.
You would play at the Roxy?
Many
That's
times.
impressive.
You played at the Roxy?
multiple
When did
times.
you play at the Roxy?
We did the Viper Room.
Do you ever play at the
Troubadour?
Troubadour?
Yes, actually. We've done all of them.
Troubadour.
We would do every
Wait,
single thing.
How did you get the...
Because we were good. And then they would make you sell
played
tickets.
at
You're like,
the
I don't even
Roxy?
believe it.
I can't believe
Yeah.
that. I love the Roxy.
Really?
That's an Yeah, I've been there a few times. It's an incredible venue. It's like iconic.
Yeah. But we would have to sell tickets.
You need to bring it
so
back.
this was...
Bring back the band.
I would
Yeah.
be down. I'd be
Can I
super
join?
down. What would you do? The triangle?
I'll do
The
anything.
cowbell?
I could. Well,
You'd
I'd
be
be
the
a backup
manager.
singer. Yeah, I'd be a manager. Yeah,
Yeah.
I could be I could be the guy that like brings the coffees to everybody.
But now here's the thing. So we would usually play, like we wouldn't be like a headline on a Friday or Saturday night. So usually we would be like a weekday night, 8 p.m., and we would have to sell like 70 tickets between the three of us. So we each had like 25 tickets to sell. And we go around school, be like, they were like $14 tickets, and just like trying to get people to buy tickets. And then our bass player's mom would sometimes just say, I'll buy the tickets, just hand them out.
No
Yeah.
way.
awesome.
And so she would sometimes, pick up the slack, and we'd just be handing them out.
It's all about the hustle.
That is so cool. That is so cool,
Yeah.
Graham. I did not know you played at the Roxy.
You know what's
man.
interesting too? We played a battle of the bands for Southern California that was sponsored by Coca-Cola. We came in second place. Second. And
like a whole-
technically it was a high school competition.
But that's
We
still
lost.
really impressive.
We lost to freshman college students because their bass player
got
was
scammed.
still
You got
still
scammed.
in high school. But they were like 3 years older than us and were really talented.
You should make a video about that, man.
Yeah.
Exposing the
Bring
scam.
it back, yeah.
But if we won, we got, I think it was like 7 songs recorded for free, plus a trip to, I think it was Scotland or Ireland. I forget what was there. It was one of those.
Okay.
But we came in second place to that. I was so upset. But we went through, like we competed, and then like they ranked us, and we go to the next one, and we'd like play again. So I think it was like 4 of them, and we lost.
Dude,
insane.
Yeah.
that is cool.
I love that. I'm
I
kind
have
of in
no
shock
exciting
right now.
childhood thing like that. That is dope.
I'll find the link.
Yeah, please do.
good.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
B-roll.
Yeah. But anyway.
Well, we could have been Pepperdine alums. We could have been SMC alums.
Yeah, I
You
know.
ruined all the opportunities.
Could have
for
seen
us.
me at the Roxy.
I know. Failure.
But my point with being a drummer was that I
Yes.
remember seeing such talented musicians, and they were broke.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing these drummers like on stage and thinking they are incredible, like way better than I was, and they
Yeah.
had been playing their entire lives, and they were broke.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if that guy can't make it, why could I? Like, what would make me different from that?
Yeah.
And then I thought too, if like the band broke up and I was like on my own,
Yeah.
session musicians, like a dime a dozen, is
Yeah.
very difficult.
It's a powerful realization, though.
Yeah.
Like to have that at 18.
Yeah.
Well, it's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah.
It's
Like-
hard to walk away from something that you're like, especially when it's something that's artistic, that you've literally like poured your heart and soul in. I mean, that's how I felt with acting, where it's like you come to this realization that like logically on paper, especially if you're somebody that is very like, I consider myself a pretty like rational person, and I'm like, I have to do what's practical. It was like, it doesn't make sense. And so I think for some people, it not making sense is what's so exciting about it, and I'm like going to do it regardless. I was never going to be one of those people. Graduated at 19, was going to go to Pepperdine. I applied to Pepperdine, Loyola, UCLA, and then one other, Chapman in California. And then my mom decided, she was still living in California at the time. My parents had totally split. My dad's still in Chattanooga. My brother was doing relatively better at that point. He was, med compliant. He was living in, I don't know what you would call the living facility, but was like a like
residency
half
sort of thing?
independent kind of thing.
Assisted living,
Sort of,
some
but for
sort?
like psychiatric things. So we had
okay.
like a nurse there and a psychiatrist on site, but he was
That's
able
nice.
to live like semi-independently. He was doing better, but still he was so close to like all the drugs that were on the street, and it was really hard for him. And my mom just did not want to be in California anymore. And she had always had this dream of having a farm. And we'd always lived in rural areas like Chattanooga. We lived on a lot of land. I was actually born on an island in Washington State where we had a farm. So I had a lot of space there, but she had always wanted to have like animals and huge gardens and run a homestead. And so as I was getting older, she was like, all right, last one has totally flown the coop. The other ones seem stable. My oldest brother has been great for years. He's totally fine. Been out of the house. He's 14 years older than me. So he was long independent. So she started looking at Idaho because I was going to stay in California and go to law school. My oldest brother was thinking about moving up to Seattle to take a job, leave Florida, go up to Seattle. So he was looking at jobs. She was like, this is great. I'll be like directly in between you guys. We'll be on the same coast. Reed, my middle brother, could either go with her or could stay in his living situation. And then I said, I can't do California anymore. And I was like, I don't even really want to stay here. I don't really know why I'm staying here other than for acting. I just can't do it. And so I moved to Boise with her and lived there for 9 months, helped her get her farm started, got a house there, started settling in. I got a job as a marketing strategist at Young Americans for Liberty, which is Ron Paul's former organization. So very libertarian. I was writing for the Foundation for Economic Education, which is the longest running free market think tank. So I was doing like economic journalism for them. And was like fully leaning into this because I had already, during COVID, I started working with PragerU. I just kind of struggled with friendships due to political reasons at UCLA during COVID. It just got so polarized, and I just
How did that begin, though? Did you start bringing up maybe certain viewpoints and getting?
So when did you recognize your political leaning?
Gosh, I'd probably say the beginning of college. But I didn't really even think that it was that important. I just kind of realized as I would look at news stories and, talk to people, I was like, oh, okay, I think that this is my opinion. I guess that this is political in nature. It was just, values I'd been raised with or things that I just intrinsically thought. And I started kind of connecting the dots with politics and being like, oh, okay, so if I believe this, then that means this. Slowly started formulating all of that. But I was not raised in a political household by any means. My mom is a student of objectivism. She adopted Ayn Rand's cat after she died. She spent years. Yes. So, she, was in textbook publishing, was, always more, freedom leaning, I would say. My older brother's very libertarian. But we were not raised in a political household. Like, my mom would listen to Rush Limbaugh in the car when my oldest brother was young, but I never heard any of that. She never listened to Ben. At most, maybe she would pull up a Dennis Prager, radio show, once every year, maybe, or something like that. We never discussed politics, ever. I had no idea what my dad believed, other than he loved the environment. Truly had no idea. And I honestly think I'm so grateful that is how I was raised, because it was all based on values. It was like how you treat people, how you see the world. Like, you intrinsically value freedom, you value individualism, you value independence, people not telling you what to do, the government not being involved in your life. But it wasn't even the government. It was just kind of, free thinking, independent. Sure. Those are the values I was raised with. So as I started being confronted with politics, it was like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I'm seeing the connections. But we literally never talked politics whatsoever. And I didn't even know that Ayn Rand was a
How did she get her cat? I had that. How did she get her cat?
She left in the middle of the night after graduating college. My grandmother wanted her to go to secretarial school. My mom said, absolutely not. So she left with her best friend from college. They drove to New York City in the middle of the night, and she was like, I'm going to get a job as a textbook publisher. And her friend had some connections, I think, through college. They're still good friends. I literally saw him a couple of months ago. He's a wealth manager now, like a free market wealth manager. So he's helped me with some stuff. But he had some connections. I believe it was through their college. They went to Davidson College with people in Ayn Rand's circle, and her two proteges who now run her two biggest organizations after her death, published her books with her, that sort of thing. Got in contact. So they started going to these philosophical salons and getting literally trained in philosophical lessons from these proteges. And Ayn Rand died soon after my mom moved to New York. Her cat, Tommy, named after Thomas Aquinas, because Thomas Aquinas was the only person to argue the existence of God from a place of reason. And even though Ayn Rand was totally atheist, she respected people who were arguing the existence of God from a place of reason, because reason was paramount to her. Reason, healthy selfishness and productivity, the biggest things for objectivists, really, in my boiled down sense, I guess. And so Tommy needed a home, and so they were like, Diane, can you take Ayn Rand's cat? So she had Ayn Rand's cat. She lived in a tiny room that didn't even have a kitchen or anything like that. She worked night shifts at a hotel doing the call person. Worked 3 jobs and finally got in the door with W.W. Norton, and she published the first objectivist libertarian textbook, and it's still published today. So she did that, and then lived in Chicago for a bit doing it. But anyway,
Tracking it.
Grant's laughing because we both
we're saying
at the
too many
same
things.
time.
We're saying
I
too many
know.
things like
Today we have been on the exact same wavelength. We just go at the exact same
But
time.
not only that, but other words.
We've said
Yeah.
the
The same
phrase
thing.
at the exact
It's
same time, the same
horrible.
phrase.
you guys
I don't know.
spend
I
time
think
we're
together.
picking
we
up
spend
on
a lot
each
of
other so
time
much.
together.
I like
yeah.
to the same time you guys went like this.
I know.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
bothering
this is
me.
tough,
It's too
man.
much.
It's
Gosh.
good.
Okay.
It's gonna be okay.
All right.
But anyway, so that is how I was raised. Those are the values I was raised. But I appreciated that it was not political because I've had people say like your mother indoctrinated you, and I was like, well, what would you say would be indoctrination? Like I was not being told about political policies or anything like that. She just raised me as any good parent would, with the values that she believed were important to create a healthy, independent young person. And those happen to be these more, I would say objectivist, libertarian, freedom leaning, whatever. Anyway, so that is how I guess started seeing that. And obviously with COVID, it became very, very politicized. But even before that, at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, midterms, it became a huge topic for people. And I had already noticed some tension because people knew that I was originally from Tennessee. And that was something that I didn't think was contentious, but apparently it was. And so
Being from Tennessee?
yeah, and it was like, you're from the South, you're backwards, you're racist. And I remember my friends being super drunk at a party, and I walked in, and one of them said, there's our racist friend Brett from Tennessee. And we hadn't even
Really?
talked about politics yet.
How does that make you feel?
It was stupid to me. But I still thought that they were good friends. And I remember coming home, calling my mom or calling my brother and being like, oh, yeah, they said this, it's so funny. And my brother would be like, that's not friendship.
Right.
Like, what? Those are just random attacks. Like, why are you allowing that to happen? I was like, oh, everybody, shoots the shit. It's fine. And they would insinuate other things like, we'd be talking about our families, and I would say, oh, yeah, well, my dad's side of the family is all from North Carolina, old, like, dirt poor farmers, and they, fought in the Revolutionary War. So I technically, I guess, could be part of, like, Daughters of the American Revolution. I think my, like, great-grandfather, like, fifth great-grandfather fought in the Revolutionary War, but, like, dirt poor tobacco farmers. And we were talking about our lineages because most of my friends were in this friend group. One was Turkish, one was Indian. We were just talking about ancestry. And when I said, like, farmers in North Carolina, they were like, oh, so your family owned slaves. And I was like, how did we get there? And I was like, and so I blew it off, but I think that's kind of how it started. And I fought back against that. I was like, we didn't. Like, I would know. And even if even if my family did, how does that impact, the person that I am now and the friend that's sitting in front of you? And so that's kind of where it started. That was even before all of, the midterm started and all of that. And then midterms, I believe it was, no, it wasn't midterms. It was primaries, for the presidential election. And so then obviously there were a lot of conversations about like Bernie and Joe Biden and that sort of thing. And I knew enough at that point, and I was like clued in enough to know I don't really think that I would vote for either of those. I wasn't like rah Trump. I never really have been. But I did not hate him. I didn't understand the vitriol about him. And so people started bringing it up to me and saying, so like, who are you going to vote for? And I was like, I don't know. Like, maybe I'll vote for, Jo Jorgensen. She's like the libertarian. I don't really know. I said, but I don't love Joe Biden. I don't love Bernie Sanders. And I mean, they lost their shit. And it just became like a huge argument and debate constantly. I remember, all of us voting in the primaries and me not voting for either Joe Biden or Bernie, and them being very, very angry. One of my friends voted for Joe instead of Bernie. Her father was a policeman, and she thought that Bernie was just like a little too much, and she got slandered because she wasn't far left enough. And that was my big in my sorority. And I remember thinking, like, why is this such an issue? Like, this is just crazy. And then COVID happened. And I remember friends, making me ride in a car by myself like 6 months in, because it's like, well, you're on the right, so obviously you don't care about COVID, so you can't, hang out with us because you're probably like not taking things seriously. I was like, well, no, it's still I wasn't even thinking that it was political at the time, even though I didn't think that lockdowns economically were going to do anything good for this country. I thought that it was 100% government overreach. BLM started taking off, and I stayed out of that for most of it until it just kept continuing on, and seeing the way that businesses were then, taking steps for racial action, all this stuff. And I was like, I think that a lot of this is, blown out of proportion. And why is the media lying about what's actually happening? Like, I'm living in LA, I'm seeing these protests. It's totally different than how they're painting it. But the kicker for me was, and this is why I left LA, there was a business in Burbank that got taken away from the owners because they stayed open during the second lockdown of COVID. And they didn't even stay open completely. They left their patio open, and it wasn't any kind of like political FU or anything like that. They left it open. People could sit on the patio and enjoy their takeout food, whatever. Got reported to the city council. It went on for 9 months. Their electricity was turned off. The business was boarded up, was chained up multiple times, and then it became personal for the owner. And he's 22, and he inherited it from his father. He became a really good friend of mine. His name is Lucas Lepagian. And then it became, the whole community rallying behind him. He would break through the doors every time. He would open it back up. Community donated generators. They kept shutting down electricity, so he just had grills, and his staff kept coming back to cook. And then, policemen on their days off would come and like protect it and that sort of thing. Like it was wild. Got tons of donations. He was arrested, I think, 4 times. Multiple, city council meetings about it. And the kicker for me was, there was one last city council meeting with public comment, and I think the public comment went on for like 4 hours. And, I called in, everybody was calling in, and this was going to be the determining factor of whether they could keep the business open. And what it looks like was going to happen was that they would have to shut down for 2 weeks, pay their due diligence, pay the fines that they had accrued, and then open back up. Because at this point, every other business in LA was open. Like you could go inside and eat.
Except for this one.
Except for this one. And by the end of the city council meeting, everything seemed fine. They were like, all right, we'll get back to you tomorrow. In the middle of that, while public comment was going on, the city of Burbank sent out a construction crew, and they built a wall around the business. A 10-foot barbed wire with like what do you call that? I guess that is the barbed wire. So it was chain link, barbed wire on top, 10 feet. So they literally could not get into the business. All their, they were paid up on their taxes. They were paid up on everything. They owned this building. I think they'd owned it for 2 generations. It was a 2-generation business. From Burbank was like a staple in the community. And they literally just took it from the owners in the middle of the public comment. And I was like, so I'm living in a place where the government can literally come in and take your home, take your business because they disagree with something that you've done, and not listen to the community members that are literally on the phone for hours calling in and saying this is absurd.
Did they take the business though, or is it more they're just deterring people from going inside? Because it sounds like the fence is more just like,
basically what it is. And saying that the business owner cannot operate.
Right.
Saying you must shut down was basically what it was. I think the building has been demolished now.
I'm thinking he just sold it. Well, I'm guessing he sold it.
What was the verdict of the hearing?
That it was just going to be shut down. But they made that decision before. So they said, "Oh, we'll come back tomorrow." And so Lucas woke up the next morning, and the house and the restaurant was totally surrounded. So it was.
So they basically just wanted to punish him for his past actions.
That's what it sounds
exactly.
Like. Yeah.
And the guy who led that, was a Burbank city councilman who ran in the DSA party. So he was a Democratic Socialist of America, ran on that party, was elected as such. And that was a kicker for me. And then in the middle of 2020, LAPD also slashed a huge part of their major crimes unit, which included the sexual assault unit, which included the gang unit. And as a woman, that really freaked me out because I already knew that I couldn't defend myself with a gun. I'm trained with guns. I've shot my entire life. And, I spent a lot of time in the city by myself. I started doing self-defense training when I was 11 years old because my mom was concerned about me going into audition rooms with adults by myself, because obviously the casting couch is a real thing. We know about the Me Too movement. She was like, I never want you to feel insecure about that. So I did that for 7 years, every single week, helped teach self-defense. So I was a very, very competent person, still am. And part of that was because, as an adult, she knew, like, you're not going to be able to carry a gun in this city. You're not going to be able to protect yourself. But they took away that extra level of protection. The LAPD response time dropped like crazy. Gang presence in Burbank started skyrocketing again in the span of like 2 months. There were 3 shootings and 2 stabbings in my 1 mile vicinity alone, which had never happened before. And I just felt totally unsafe. And so my mom was leaving for Boise, and I was like, I don't really know if I want to be here alone. I don't like this. I don't like the values that are around me. Why would I stay in a place that, does not value my security or safety, and where the government is so willing to punish you for having a differing opinion? I was like, I don't think that this is where I really want to start my adult life. I can do it somewhere else. And so I was like, I'll figure it out. I'll go to Boise. I loved it. I loved her farm. I loved the remote work that I was doing. I got into Boise's law school, so I was going to do a dual MBA and JD program, which was 4 years. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. I thought I would probably go do constitutional law, specialize in 2A, which was what I was really interested in. And then I actually met over the summer with a bunch of constitutional lawyers, and they said, don't do it. And they're like, you're going to make no money. It's a waste of money. Because unless you're going to one of the top schools and you're going into corporate law, you will make no money. You're going to waste 4 years, because I was doing 2 programs. And they said, you're already working in politics. You're doing adjacent, basically. You are, making videos for PragerU. You have this marketing strategist job at another organization. You're writing. You're doing journalism. You have the connections now. You don't need to go to law school to make those connections. You can do advocacy. And the exact words he said was, you can do everything we can do except sign the brief. Why would you go to school for 4 years just to do that and go into debt? Because I got somewhat of a scholarship for it, but I was still going to have to pay a lot of money for it. And if you look at the discrepancy between the amount of legal jobs that are available and the amount of law schools, it's just insane. I mean, we are pumping out so many JD students, and there are not enough positions. I think the base salary for a law student that did not go to like one of the top 5 is like in the 65, 75 range.
Yeah, it's not that much.
No.
Plus, law is, I believe, the unhappiest career.
Yeah. And I'm such a creative person. The people in my life are like, oh, this doesn't make sense. But I was like, I'm smart. Like, I am academic. I can make a difference. I want to fight for this. I was really politically engaged at the time. And then the day that orientation started, I was like, I can't. You're all right. I can't do it.
Yeah.
So I withdrew. I had no plan. I was doing that journal, writing at fee. I was being a marketing strategist, and I was a waiter at a restaurant in Boise. So I was doing all 3 of those. I left Trader Joe's, and I was like, I'm just going to figure it out. And my mom was like, you just blew up everything, basically. You need to figure it out. And I was like, I'll come up with a plan. So I was in the process of coming up with a plan. I was still making videos for PragerU, for Young Americans for Liberty. I was running all their social media accounts when I got a DM from Daily Wire. And they said, we've seen your short form videos. We love your content. Would you be interested in having a meeting with us? And I thought it was a joke. And I was like, this can't be real. So I responded, and I was like, okay. And I've respected the Daily Wire for a really long time. I'd actually looked and applied for jobs with them. I applied to be Candace Owens' assistant like
serious?
a year prior.
Wow.
Yeah. And her manager rejected me before I didn't even do an interview, which she knows now and she thinks is so funny.
Yeah. What was the reason for the rejection?
I didn't live in Nashville.
Oh,
yeah, she just didn't even respond because they were only looking at people that were in Nashville.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was like, I'll move. My manager was like, I'll move. And it's funny because her manager and I, her ex-manager and I are now like friends, and I like was messaging her
That
the
worked
other
out
day.
for a reason.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I applied for like an associate producer role on Ben's show in Florida. Like I was like, I want to be involved in this company somehow because I loved what they were doing in the entertainment sector. And I was like, I could get back into storytelling where my values are more in line with what they're doing. And that could kind of give me the balance that I'm looking for. And I could be on the production side, so I would have more control and a little more stability, which is also what I was needing. And so I had wanted that, but I also in the back of my head thought, this organization, it's skewed older. All the hosts are older. It's a bit more established. I don't know if they're going to want to be hiring. I was 19 at the time, a 19-year-old kid to do any of this. And I was like, you know what? I will continue working at Young Americans for Liberty, which is a student organization. PragerU really focuses on students. And I was like, I'll stay here for a few years. I'll apply again later on. And maybe I'll, get my foot into the door with Daily Wire. Or maybe I'll go back to acting. I don't know. I'll just, leave it up to whatever happens. So I got this DM. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. This is insane. Respond back. We start emailing back and forth. I do a Zoom call. Really like the people. All of them still work here except one. You guys met the girl earlier who sent me the DM.
Yep.
And she was just scrolling on. She ran the TikTok account and found me. And here we are. But then they said, you only do short form content. We'd like you to do like, I did reactions and like my reactions to news stories and that kind of thing. And they said, could you do like longer responses to news stories? And then could you also show us like maybe a pop culture thing? And I said, okay. So I did that. And then they hired me. It was, I think we negotiated for about 3 months. I found out that I got the job while I was in the field with my mom in her pasture, like wrangling a donkey or something like that. And I got a call from our CMO and I was grilled for like an hour.
On what? What did that sound like?
It was basically like, are you, we're taking a risk on a 19-year-old kid and we're going to bring you here and we're going to try to create something with you. We want to make sure that you're not some like fluke. And so it was basically like, I've seen your resume. The people below me are advocating for you. I want you to tell me why you deserve to be here. And I was like shaking. I was like standing up in my mom's bedroom shaking. And it was like, how are you different than other 19-year-olds? Like this is, and Daily Wire is like very, very hustle oriented. We are constantly, we're past startup mode, but we are growing so fast every single day. Like you'll see Jeremy Boring speeches about the fact that this is an objectively a hard place to work because we do so much. We pump out so much content every single day. And the benefits, I think, definitely outweigh the fact that it's a lot of hard work. So I think we're doing really good things, and I'm really proud of everything that we do. But they wanted to make sure that my ambition and that my, hustle and what I was willing to take on matched what they were going to be expecting. And if they're going to take a risk on a 19-year-old. Ended up working out. I guess I did a good job. I remember coming in and meeting that guy and literally being like, I'm so, I hope it worked, whatever. And then I think that was solidified at the end of November. I had 10 days to move. I fought with them. I was trying to be able to start in the first of the year, but they were like, we really want you here now to get started on developing the show.
Yeah. Now, why didn't you decide to go off and do that on your own? Because you could have just as easily said, okay, I could make YouTube videos, I can make TikToks and shorts, I'm doing it already. Why have the management of the Daily Wire?
The mentorship.
Yeah.
And I've said this before, the value of being in this building where I am next to Candace Owens, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Jeremy Boring, Jordan Peterson, where I get to interact with these people often on a daily basis, is immeasurable to me. That is truly priceless. And I feel like, they have been very, very gracious with, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, of, as the show has grown, they have, changed my compensation, that kind of thing. They are very, very proactive with making sure that, the talent is supported and that sort of thing. But I would literally be fine with barely being paid and being here because the things that I am learning, not only about how to navigate this space, but also on an intellectual and an ideological level from these people who all have very, very different opinions. If you watch the backstage events that Daily Wire does here, you will see the differing opinions of all of the hosts. And the fact that we all get to be here and work and debate and go back and forth and still respect each other and still, support each other's shows, it's, truly priceless. And I knew that I was not going to get that anywhere else, and it felt like this was just an incredible opportunity. And in my head, I was like, if I hate it, I can leave in a year, because I wasn't signing on a multi-year anything at the time. I was just coming, we were going to try a show. And I was like, if I hate Nashville, I always have a backup plan. I had a house in Boise, I can come back, I can go to law school again, I can try to do something else, I can go back to acting, whatever. But I was going to kick myself if this didn't happen. But I almost didn't do it. I almost didn't even send in the longer reaction they were asking for because I was so nervous. And I don't know what it was. I was so insecure. I hadn't acted in a really long time. And it isn't acting, but it's still putting yourself on camera.
It's a presentation. Yeah.
Exactly. And I hadn't been judged in that way in a really long time. I'd just been doing my stupid little minute-long videos. And it's weird to say it was growing considering where I am now. But, I started a new Instagram, and I think by that point I had 7,000 followers, which is still I was not really promoting
decent.
it.
Right.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this and it's fine. And I kept pushing it off. And I was like, I'm just so scared. I just don't know if it's right. I don't really want to do it. I loved Boise. And I was like, I'm happy here. I'm happy working on your farm. I'm happy with this house and this life I've created. And my mom literally sat me down and looked me in the eyes and she was like, I don't care if you take the job or not, but you are going to kick yourself in 5, 10 years, a year if you do not send this in, if you don't at least try. Yeah. And she was like, your entire life you've taken all of these risks. You have literally been balls to the wall, sending letters to managers, showing up, emancipating, whatever you're doing, going and doing a business program, applying for law school, like you pointed out, I literally would take any risk and just do it because it sounded interesting to me. And if I hated it, then hell, at least I have a good story about it. Going to public school. And she was like, I don't know what has changed over the past year. And I think that I kind of felt like a beaten dog in a way.
Sure.
After COVID, I lost most of my friends. I left LA, which is all I knew. I wasn't acting anymore. I think I just lost all my confidence. And she was like, this is an incredible opportunity for you. And it is also an incredible opportunity to just get back on the horse, try something. You're literally a waitress right now. You have literally nothing to lose. And I was like, fine, you're right. Diane's usually right. So I sent it in. They loved it anyway. I came here, and then I was here in December, and we developed the show together, and it launched a year ago yesterday.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy you've done all of this in a year.
Yeah.
I keep thinking you've been doing this for 5 years. That's insane. So 2 million subscribers 1 year. I think, how many did you get in the first 4 months? I think it was 700,000 subscribers in a few months.
I hit 1 million in 6 months, or in 5 months.
What was that like for you? And where did that audience come from? Was that Ben's audience navigating over to you because maybe there's a bit of a resemblance?
I think
or is
initially, yes. So we did not do any paid ads for my channel at all. In fact, Daily Wire did a very, very soft marketing campaign. There was barely anything. I remember in my pitch with Jeremy, when we brought the show in front of him, he didn't even know really who I was at the time. And the CMO had brought me on, and I was like, hey, I'm the literal kid that's here trying to, get a show approved. And he watched the pilot, which was so bad. And he looked at me and he said, I don't understand the show. It's not for me, but I know it's for somebody else. It's not really for our audience, but I know it's going to reach somebody else, so let's try it. And I mean, literally threw us like a few grand to put together a set. Took some team members from like our social video team and we're like, just try it and see what happens. So I did my own promotion on my like social video channel or my social media channels, and I had been doing like some Daily Wire videos, like news hits and that sort of thing. So I think I was probably up to like 20,000 like followers at that point. But still didn't have a YouTube channel. So there were some people who knew who I was in the Daily Wire circle, and then I did one hit on Ben's show and announced the show, and that was it. I don't think any of the other hosts talked about it. Candace didn't even know that I had a show or who I was for like 6 months because nobody told her.
Yep.
It was like a trial and error. They did not put any paid or anything. So I think some of it migrated over, and Daily Wire would repost me every once in a while. So I think the initial like bulk, I would say maybe under 100,000 came from the Daily Wire audience. But then it's just been.
Where did the rest come from? Was that just a series of videos that you posted that did well? Like,
yeah.
What was the
shorts?
Shorts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that was not something I really knew a lot about, but I was already doing a ton of organic content for Instagram and TikTok, and so that made its way to YouTube. And one thing I think I've done differently is that all of my shorts content was original. It wasn't clips from the show. It wasn't anything like that. It was all like, this is designed for
Yeah.
YouTube or
So,
for YouTube Shorts.
In the beginning, how did you pick topics to talk about? Was this on you, or would they come to you ever?
And it still is on me.
Still
so
on you.
I create the show, I pick the topics, I pull all the comments. If there's anything that I want to write, sometimes it's off the cuff. These days I'll kind of have like bullet points of points I want to hit. If there's a message that I want to leave people with, sometimes I'll write that out if it feels a little more touchy, but it still is pretty improvised. And I just research the subject really well, and I try to become an expert on that like one little thing every day. And then share it. So I still do all of that. But it was basically just living on social media, and it still is. And so most of my content is social media heavy. I will only cover something if it is like trending on social media or if I notice that it's about to. So that can mean like literally trending on Twitter, or if it's a trend on TikTok that is like picking up, or a thing in society that has, whether it's a social media trend or just a trend in general in the original sense of the word. And so I would find things through there, and then, it's called the comment section. That was kind of the get of the show and the angle, was that I wasn't just like talking about a subject, just my opinions, but I was going into the comments and actually trying to get people's actual opinions about it.
Yeah.
So I'd get people on both sides of the aisle, on both, sides of whatever issue I was talking about, and read those comments. And it was fun to, kind of act them out and use my acting background and make it really, really fun. And then I wanted it to be really, really punchy, because I know my generation, I know that I hate watching long form content because our attention spans are dead due to TikTok. So it was very, very fast paced. So I wanted like memes, like we had our first, editing run. It was like, we need more. It was like more cowbell, like more memes, more fast cuts.
Grim
I
hates that.
Yeah. But it works. I mean,
can't
that's like that's what my generation
Yeah.
needs. It's like, I need
That's
my
what I'm
attention.
saying.
Yeah.
I
I'm
hate it.
saying. He always
I
rejects
watch
it.
my own TikToks, like sound effects, zoom in.
That's what I love.
B-roll over here, sound effects. I'm like,
I mean, I wish
why?
I
But it
didn't
works.
love it.
But it works.
But for young people, it's what we are.
Text on screen.
Yep. You got to
Yeah.
have so many things flying. So we really worked very hard on creating that, that style. And then I wanted, the comments were kind of a unique thing. And then obviously that I was going to be, more right leaning was a different thing, because there wasn't really anybody in that space that was doing this kind of like laid back cultural commentary, streamery type stuff. It was really on the right that was my age.
Yeah.
Because it's like, there's a lot of them that are, 35-year-old dudes, but like a 19-year-old girl, like that's not really the normal thing.
Right.
But yeah, so it was on social media primarily, and I started off doing more newsy political things. I strayed away from that just because I've gotten far more disinterested in that.
Why did you lose interest?
Because I obviously think that politics matter, and I'm interested in politics on like an academic and intellectual level. I think it's interesting. I care about learning about it. But Andrew Breitbart once said, and I think it still holds weight, that politics is downstream from culture. And so it starts with culture and the conversations that we're having every single day. And it starts with values. And that's how I was raised. That's what I care about. I care about, looking at trends on social media and saying, why is this something that people care about? And I think that we can talk about, social media trends and cultural things and movies and TV in Hollywood without a political angle, but just talking about like, what is driving these people to believe this way? And in my mind, a lot of that goes back to like my current critique with my generation, I would say, is that it's driven by this desperate need for both attention and to victimize themselves. I think that victimization is holding most of my generation back. I think we hold ourselves back a lot of the time. And we know that being a victim these days does give you more attention. And so it's things like that where it's like I'm not directly talking about politics and theory and like this new law, but I'm talking about things that do by default influence politics. And I also think that talking about things that are more cultural and are more value-based, number one, they interest me, but I think that it's easier to connect with people on a human-to-human level that way. It's less polarizing.
I get that.
I can have so much more empathy with people, and I think people find me more relatable because of that. And when I'm talking to people who are on opposite sides of the political aisle, that is where we find the most common ground, is by talking about this. And then being able to say like, oh, okay, so now I see why you think that the way you do, because of this value that you hold, or because of this, let's talk about it in the context of culture. And you're able to reach so many more people, and you're able to find so much more common ground. And I think it makes my content maybe more digestible for people, I would say, because it doesn't come across as like, I'm going to hit you over the hammer with like, let's talk about Trump, let's talk about Biden. It's like,
but don't you think it's also easier to talk a little bit more about like drama topics or maybe topics that hit on a more emotional level than
exactly.
like logical?
Yeah. And people are driven by emotion these days. And I've said this publicly before on the show, and I love Ben, and he's a mentor of mine, and I think facts don't care about your feelings. It's such a fun, punchy line. But I think, especially with my generation, they don't really care about facts. It's like emotions are dictating so much now, whether that's better or worse. That's something we can all relate on. That's the human-to-human connection. And obviously, facts are important at the end of the day. But if you can't reach somebody emotionally, whether that's a positive emotion or a negative emotion, like facts will go out their ear. They don't care. And especially in a time when we see so many, whether it's, scientists or politicians, the media lying about facts or changing them, like literally just, saying an outright lie or getting the facts changed in order to fit an agenda or a narrative. It's like, okay, so then if they're doing that, then how do we reach people with emotion? And that also, as like somebody who comes from like an acting and a storytelling background, and why I loved acting so much in addition to it being an escape, was that it allowed me to tap into the emotions that I was too scared to deal with as a child and was too scared to feel or express. And so I really, really understand the importance of connecting to people on that level and reaching people at that level. And so it makes me happier too. And so as a content creator, I feel more fulfilled in what I'm doing because I read my comments and it's less about people, being fired up about some political policy or being angry at Joe Biden, which gets so tiresome. I don't want to talk about him anymore. It's boring. I don't want to talk about Trump anymore, whether it's positive or negative. It's boring. But hearing people's anecdotal stories and the way that they are emotionally responding to things in the world right now is really interesting to me. And you really understand where people come from. And so I think that's why I'm able to connect, what I grew up doing my career prior to this and what I'm doing now. I think it kind of fuses together in a really, really nice way.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting quote that politics lie downstream from culture.
Yeah.
And I actually completely agree. And recently, I shouldn't say recently, I say probably about a year ago, I became a lot more disinterested in politics.
Yeah.
Growing up, I was kind of interested in it, and I had gone to like some political meetings and stuff like that growing up. And then you're laughing. A year or so ago, I realized it's kind of worthless. It's kind of useless. Like a lot of the times, like you said, it's just all filled with vitriol, and you can't really focus on like bigger picture things, like hating on certain people. It's mostly on like incidental, anecdotal with one person. And also on top of that, what I noticed is that conservatives and liberals, and I could get blamed for this, actually have a lot more in common in terms of values, like core values, than people think.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times the values are just masked by culture and certain like frameworks of where you grew up, how you grew up and stuff like that. But the value systems are virtually the same.
And there's very, very extremes on both sides, and those are,
That's what gets the attention, though.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of times, those, very, polarizing sides, like obviously they get very angry at each other, and it's important to talk about them because those obviously feed into the masses. But I think if you find like commonplace people on the street, they will have things in common. And I think they get pulled in either direction, and they feel like they have to have allegiance to like, okay, this really intense, crazy side, this really intense, crazy side. And I think it's important to show people that it's like, it's okay to have common sense. If I could say that like I could boil down my content into like one word, it would be common sense. And it's like, I just want to have a place where you can, laugh, where you can feel like the world isn't too crazy on either side.
You know what's funny? That could be your second channel. We were talking about this earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Common Sense with Brett Cooper.
There you go.
Yeah, that's
It's in the
good.
comment
That's clever.
section.
Yeah.
Common Sense.
Yeah.
That works.
You're welcome. I'm
That's
coming
really
up with
good,
so many
man.
great
Yeah.
ideas.
I know
Yeah,
he's been like
Yeah.
popping them
Just-
off
that's
all
good,
day,
man.
guys.
Even
Yeah.
for the sponsor earlier, I'm like,
Yeah.
you gotta get a sponsor.
Yeah.
Exactly. But no, and I think
Yeah.
that that's something that a lot of people are missing these days because that isn't inherently political. And I think what you were saying about it being worthless is that especially as a young person, I mean, you probably relate to like Gen Z, there's a reason why we feel so hopeless all the time. Like the world is just filled with fear porn. That everybody's telling us the world is like burning around us, or we're born into 9/11. Like I mean, all of this stuff. Like it's just like constant
But there is a reason for
anger.
that because
Yeah.
that's what gets the clicks.
Yes,
And so of
exactly.
course it's going to feed
And it
into
gets
that.
people super angry and that sort of thing. But we live in we have grown up in a very strange world where we're the most digital of any generation before. And so that's a totally new thing. It's like very, very heated and polarized. And I think that a lot of Gen Z is just exhausted. And there's a reason why I think so many Gen Zers say, I don't want to have families, I don't want to have kids. And I think having children is like the most hopeful thing that
Don't
you
you feel like
can
every
do.
generation says that though?
No,
like millennials
man.
say, like, oh, I
It
don't
is
want to have
crazy.
kids.
I talk to people and they're like,
No,
I
really?
do not want to have kids. That's a deal breaker, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm just completely
it's
bewildered. I'm like,
because-
think that like 30
what
years
in
ago
life
was
could
just
be
as
better
common?
than being a father? I don't know.
But
I really don't know.
I'm
feel
just saying,
like that's the-
I think every generation says
That'd
the
be
same
interesting
thing.
to see what people say.
Yeah, because imagine like going through World War II and thinking like, oh, I don't want to bring up a kid in this environment. Or
That's true.
the
I also will
Vietnam
say,
War.
I think it's a
There's
part
so
of the
many-
culture. Like people like the rebellious nature of, I'm not going to have kids and stuff
Yeah,
like that.
I
I'm
don't
a
wanna
lone
do
wolf.
what
I want to be
yeah.
by myself. But that's also because life can be pretty good if you just default to like going on your phone and like
And
being
not having to-
numb in the
yeah.
mind.
But I
and
think
stuff
there's
like
also
that.
less societal pressure now to have kids.
Yeah.
You don't
I mean,
need to have a
Yeah.
child.
I think it's even
Yeah.
in the opposite side of things.
Yeah.
Like I remember having conversations with my friends in high school and I would say like, I want to have kids, and they'd be like, you would throw it all away for a child
Oh, yeah.
like that? And I was like, we're 15, and you're like, you're so angry about this already. It was, and like even at that young age, they were so anti
Yeah.
it.
It's also kind of cool to like say that you don't want to have kids.
Yeah.
You want to be a lone wolf. I
Yeah.
see a lot of people doing that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a benefit in waiting. That's my belief.
Yeah, I mean, you should probably
yeah.
wait for, while you're ready. But
the
at the
right
same time,
person
we
to
said
do it.
about
Yeah.
like,
it forces
getting
you to
an
grow up as
established
well, which is nice.
career.
For a lot of people,
You
they
know.
can have a baby at a younger age, and then they're kind of forced to take in the parental role and then mature at a younger
But I don't think that should be done out of a pressure to like.
That
you
is
know,
true.
that's
No,
the
it
right
should
thing
be
to
done out
do
of
is like.
pressure. Of
But if
course
you
not.
want
Not-
to, yeah.
But I feel
Yeah.
like for a lot of women, there is that pressure where it's like, your mid 20s, like when are you going to start having kids? And I feel like
But
that shouldn't
also,
be.
still biological. Like obviously,
But
it's a
true,
societal
but you
pressure,
could also
as a
be you could
woman-
also be 30 and
Yeah.
have just as a successful of
That
as
is
a
true. I
True.
mean, my
Yeah,
mom
as a
did have
birth,
me
yeah.
at, I think it was 42. But as somebody who literally wants like 5 or 6 children, I'm like,
Really?
obviously like not right now, but I
Right,
do
right.
think about that of like, I don't think I want to be having a kid at 42. And so I'm like,
It's kind of a tough thing because you think you want to have it at like, 24, 25, 26.
Yeah.
But because you want to be young while your
Yeah.
kids are like growing up. You play catch with them and stuff like that. Your
doesn't
shoulders
sound
don't hurt.
appealing to me at
But
all.
at the same time, you want to be able to enjoy your 20s. So I don't
exactly.
know.
You gotta
It's a
find
tough
the
situation.
balance.
I think though, when you have a kid, at least what I'm hoping for, who knows if it's actually like this, that just everything in your life becomes so much better. Everything. And my life's already very, very good. But as you have a kid, you have
Graham's
someone
like,
that
I'm
you
not
have to
giving
care
you
about.
But
enough.
I feel like,
And I feel like
having your 20s and having that freedom to pursue anything, like you moving here
Yeah.
would have not have been probably as doable
Yeah.
if you had a newborn. And it's like that's something you have to
Well,
consider.
I also
I
think
mean,
I'm in
your
a-
mom did move you around quite a bit when you were young.
Yeah, I was
going to
say,
But-
I also feel like I'm in
yeah.
a different situation where, in a way, obviously it's not the same thing as like the freedom in your 20s, but I feel like I've experienced a lot in my 21 years where it's like I've literally moved all over the country. I've traveled internationally. I've had multiple careers at this point. It's like, all right, cool. I feel very stable in the job that I have now. And so it's kind of weird. I had this conversation with a couple of friends of mine who are still kind of in this like flux of like, I don't know where I want to live permanently or whatever. And I was like, you know what? I'm not really in a position where if like I got pregnant, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, like what's going on? It's like, oh, I'm actually like very stable. And that's terrifying. That's actually scarier to me because I, was thinking like, farther down the line, it
Yeah.
was like, oh, like I'm an adult now. That's very, very weird to be like very comfortable with that. But no, but I definitely think for women, like obviously it is, societal, but for me at least it is biological because I had, my brothers were 12 and 14 years older than me. My mom had me when she was 42. They had a totally different relationship with my grandparents than I did because my grandparents were young, super fun. I barely saw my grandparents growing up because they were older. They were moving into assisted living. They didn't want to deal with like I have one cousin that's closer to my age. And we like barely saw grandparents because of that. Totally different. My brothers traveled with them, did all of this stuff. And I remember growing up being like, I don't want that. Like, I don't want my parents to be tired. I don't want my, grandparents to be, I don't want my kids to have that experience. It all goes back to how
my
you're
mom
raised.
was 38 when she had me.
Okay.
So for me, that just seems kind of normal.
Yeah.
And it seems like, at least from my perspective, you pursue everything that you want to do,
Yeah.
on your own, have that freedom, go and travel the world, like have those experiences. And then once you've done those, then it makes sense, I think.
Do you think you would still like travel the world and do that kind of thing with kids?
Probably not. No. I'm very set. Like
You're like, I'm ready to settle.
Yeah, well, even for me, traveling is just like it's not something I necessarily look
That's
forward to.
crazy.
Okay.
That to me is
It's
crazy,
a hassle. I
man.
love just
No.
like being home.
I will
Okay.
say,
It's
okay,
comfortable.
I
and,
do
like,
agree with that. I don't
Yeah.
like menial traveling. I don't like just hopping. Like if I'm just like popping over to do like a work thing. Oh my god, it's exhausting.
Really?
I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's. Oh,
That's his favorite
God.
kind of traveling, work travel.
No, well, I mean, it is paid for, and so that's nice. But
Okay.
these days, where it feels like travel is so screwed up post-COVID, in my opinion, where I feel every time I travel, like something goes wrong. And I was in the midst of like the Southwest chaos over Christmas, and I was like, I cannot do this anymore. However, like international travel still excites me, and I've always said that I would love to like spend a year abroad with my future kids and like teach them another language and do something like that. But I also think because I was homeschooled and because I had so much flexibility, I think of like having kids is like, oh my god, there's all these opportunities. Like this is so cool.
See, for me, I want to do van life with Macy
Okay.
and just travel the United States in a van. I'd love to take the iced coffee hour on
Okay.
the road. Like at some
You
point,
ready
I think
to
it would
move
be
into a van?
get an RV.
I wouldn't be opposed to it. Here's the thing. I'm a very open-minded guy. Like
Okay.
anyone can pitch me anything. I'm like, sure, why not?
be
Let's
so
see what
much fun.
happens. So I would be
wanna
down
do-
for that. Test it out for a year
I
or
want to
so.
do van life.
You can have the
That's
bunk.
the one thing.
I could have the bunk. Yeah.
But
I would-
it's crazy
Sounds
though.
comfy.
But even like having a dog makes
Yeah.
things difficult because you can't necessarily
sure.
take the dog everywhere you go. Having a cat easier, but having a reef aquarium is probably the most limiting thing for me.
I
you
can't
laugh.
believe.
we
Here's
bringing
the
it
thing.
back?
He wanted it so badly. This reef
How
aquarium.
big is
and
this?
350 gallons.
It's really
It's
big.
huge.
Yeah.
But it's so delicate. It's like someone's got to be there to like fill up the water for the reservoir like
Do
every
you have
2
like
days.
a caretaker? So I mean, obviously, I have
There are
your
a couple
fiance,
people in
but-
Vegas that can do it.
Yeah, they know the ins and the outs, but still, if I'm there, I
Yeah.
test the waters. I make sure like if something fell over, I
Yeah.
I keep it pristine.
Yeah.
So leaving that for more than a week at a time is difficult. So that's
So then thinking about kids, obviously.
I
that
can't
seems-
I can't do that van life.
Yeah, and are you gonna take the reef aquarium with you?
No, I wish I could.
Put it in the van.
Yeah.
Custom built van.
I heard this analogy and I loved it because I always grew up planning on having at least 2 kids. And I was like,
Okay.
okay, maybe 2, maybe 3. And then I heard from somebody, they're like, I want to have a bunch of kids. And
Yeah.
I was like, why would you want to have a bunch of kids? He's like, man, 10, 11, 12.
Yeah.
I'm like, why do you want so many? He's like,
this again?
you want me to say?
Yeah.
Meet Kevin said it. He's another finance YouTuber.
Okay.
And he was like, and I was like, why do you want to have so many kids? He's like, think about it this way, man. They're your best friends.
Yeah.
Why would you not want more best friends?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, that makes sense.
You don't have to
as
give
long as you can
birth to your
financially.
best friend. I have too many friends. I can't
Families
keep
are
in
great
touch with
because
all
you're
of them.
bonded by something like it's
I
kind of like a
disagree.
marriage. It's like a marriage where you're existing with somebody and you're living with them and you're happy and everything. But as soon as you sign that contract, it's another level that you
Yeah.
have to break through if you want to leave
Which
it. So you
I
have
also
to make
think
it
is a
work.
societal thing where so many people think that marriage is like is so much easier to throw away or it doesn't mean as much. And they're like, oh, I can get married. I'll just get divorced if it doesn't work, like whatever.
Oh no!
And it's like
people can
even-
make it work. That's the
Yes.
thing, and they don't think that they do. I think people are way more compatible in general.
What about instances of cheating? Do you want to be with somebody who's cheating?
Oh no, yeah,
I
I'm
wouldn't.
not somebody who's like I don't
if
believe
I
in
got
divorce
gotta
and
be
anything.
there's got to be a line there where it's like
There absolutely does, but
Yeah,
I
but
do
they don't want it
think
to work
that-
out at all. The thing is,
Yeah.
it has to be 2 people that both want it
Oh,
to
of
work
course.
out,
No, I
and you
agree.
can make it work out regardless of
I
circumstances.
think it's
I
less about
agree.
the ending of marriage and more about like as you're entering into marriage. And I see a lot of my friends, and I see some of them that are a little more trivial with it, and then some that are I mean they take it so seriously, and this is the end all be all. And even if you're already living with each other or something like that, still they say like things change. And you could become just like, oh, we're basically roommates, but you have to like actively work. And so that's something I see with at least like our generation of it being like, oh, if it doesn't work, it doesn't, we can just break up basically and get divorced. I'm like, oh.
That's
And
crazy.
as somebody who went through
that was like one
a
of the
divorce, as a child and that sort of thing, I'm like, that's not easy. It's not a quick fix. Like that thing took 5 freaking years. It's exhausting. But anyway, that was just my side about marriage too. But I do.
It
I
doesn't
think
seem
the same
like it's
way
a
about
good
you guys.
thing to be like, I want to have friends, so I'm going to have kids. It's just like, that's
It's not friends, man.
You gotta
It's
do it for
best
yourself.
friends, Graham. Best friends. Okay, have you ever had a best friend before?
Yes.
And what was that like?
Fantastic. I have
Exactly.
many best friends.
And you can have more as long as you have kids. I think, look, you have kids, and not only that, but I feel like you're also contributing to the greater good, especially
That's
if you're.
how I feel.
But
If
that
you're a
seems
good
selfish.
parent.
That seems selfish. That seems
No,
like you're
it's not,
bringing
man.
life
It is-
into
I
the world
feel like
because
it-
you want. a best friend.
No, dude. I think if you can raise kids and you can turn them into great citizens and they are productive, they help out people, they advocate for
Yeah,
the
but I feel like you have to have a kid with no expectation. Like you have to go in thinking I'm going to do this, give it my best shot.
No. You go in, you have to be so intentional about having children. Like
I'm going in with
that's what
the
I'm
highest
saying.
expectations.
But that's what I'm saying. But you can't go in with like they're gonna love me and they're gonna do this and do that. I feel like you can.
Well, I think
They're gonna
that's
love
different.
me.
Yeah.
I think that like
How could they
Jack,
not
though.
love me,
Jack's
man?
fine.
That's great.
They're gonna love Jack.
I was gonna say, I think that, you know, as somebody who, like, with my brother and that sort of thing, I've watched his relationship with my parents be so fractured over the years of, you know, with his, you know, drug abuse and like that sort of thing. I've also watched, you know, with my father, you know, the way that, you know, our relationship was, you know, totally destroyed at some point. And my mom and I have also gone through periods, you know, where we're closer, we're not closer, but especially with her, even in dealing with my brother, like, I feel like I watch her as a parent, and no matter what happens, like, that love is unwavering. And her desire to force you, it's like, you look at parents and your job is to like get the kid to leave the nest, basically, to create, you know, this productive, fulfilled, independent, go out and do good things. And that is like constantly her goal. That's the reason why she was encouraging me to, you know, take this job, do this thing, move across the country, do all of this. With my brother, it was not just like, oh, honey, I just want you to be, it was like, I want you to be able to get better so that you can go out in the world and continue doing good things and living your life and being fulfilled. Like, her job is not to keep you, it is to bolster and continue working. And even with like there were times where my brother like hated my mom, hated the things that she was trying to get him to do. I don't want to take these meds. I can't believe you're kicking me out of the house. Like, all of this stuff, unwavering. And even now, it's like he permanently lives in a psychiatric facility. He's no longer in like an assist or whatever. Like, he is nonverbal. He will be there permanently, even like fully on meds. Like, it went so far. And he was like totally sober, was not abusing drugs, was med compliant, living with me in Idaho for a year, and it just snapped one day. And so he permanently lives there, and even still, like, she still holds out hope. Like, she would still drop anything and do everything, even though he has, like, in many ways, totally blown up some of the stuff that she offered. And that is the coolest thing to me, to be able to, like, from her perspective of, like, you get to experience a love like literally nothing else. And also, it's literally your job to mold these humans, to, like, send them out into the world to hopefully be good people. And also, like I said earlier, it's sort of like for the greater good, but also I think that having kids is hopeful, and saying like, I do think that there is like a world to be left for you. Like, I am going to do everything in my power to make sure that the world that I leave behind for you, like my legacy or whatever, is, you know, something that's good for you. And I do believe that you can change things and that you can continue making change. It's incredibly hopeful. And that's when I look at our generation who's like, no, the world's doomed. I don't want to have kids because of that. It's like, oh my God, like, no wonder Gen Z is so freaking
Is that the
depressed.
general consensus though? Because I feel like, again, we're just getting the extremes in either end.
It's a pretty popular opinion.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's the reason most of them.
Oh,
To
bro,
me, it
this
just
is a
seems-
serious conversation to have if you're
Really?
dating at this age.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
I just think it's, you know, people are having kids later because there's more opportunity out there.
No,
there's more
it
to
might be
do.
for
It's like,
millennials, but for Gen Z, it's like,
super common.
yeah.
really?
Oh, dude.
But then again,
it's crazy.
you
The
know
amount
what?
of conversations I'll have, and they'll be like it comes up, and they say, I don't want to have kids. Immediately,
You're done.
It just ends it.
But
Yeah.
don't you think that's also can be an opinion that changes over time?
It could be, but why would I risk it?
Yeah, that's a pretty hefty.
No, but
thing
I'm
to
just saying,
place
if you're
your
talking to your
bets on.
buddies and you're just saying, do you want to have kids? No, I'm, you know, and they're 19, I feel like that's a lot more common.
My
than
buddies, they
ask
want to
them-
have kids.
Ask them 10 years from now. The same people
All
who
my
said
friends, they
no.
wanna
How
have
many
kids.
who said no will have kids? Just change
Well, I don't
their
really keep in
mind.
touch with the people that said.
Really? Do you just
No.
like just audio?
All my friends are. I like to think that they're reflections of me in some capacity, and yeah, they all want to have kids. In fact, one of them, he got married already. He's probably gonna have a kid soon. Yeah, same age. So.
I mean, like, on
Yeah.
the flip side, like, my brother, the oldest brother, thought about, you know, wanted kids and then never, you know, really met anybody that he wanted to have kids with. And so he's just kind of been like resigned himself to not having kids. So I think it can change on the opposite end. But I think as somebody who, like, you know, dates intentionally and like looks for a potential partner and that sort of thing, it's like, if you're even wavering on that right now, I'm like, no.
Yeah.
It's even like, I think it's like a value thing, like from the get-go. It's like, I'm so hopeful, I'm so excited about. If you are not like that on board with it, of like wanting this kind of life, and it's like, I know that I will probably want to homeschool my kids for at least part of my life, which means, or part of their life, which means that I, you know, will have to, you know, he or I will have to make a certain amount of money in order to, you know, give that opportunity. Or if I want to, you know, travel and live like a year abroad with them or whatever, like that's kind of, those are the kinds of things that I bring up. Because it's,
Yeah, I think I brought that up on the second date with Macy.
see?
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
She asked if I wanted kids, and I said one day, not
Yeah.
right now. I want to do van life and do the iced coffee hour. But I was very adamant about 1, and she's 2. So I'd be okay with 2.
That's good.
But I grew up really as like an only child. So for me, I loved just having like all the attention. I get everything.
I don't know.
I
I think there's a great
don't have
relationship
that,
between siblings. I have an older brother, and we grew up together 2.5 years apart. And the things that I learned from his mistakes, I didn't necessarily have to learn them myself, because I could see him acting out of line. My parents were like, "Oh, you better not do that." And I'm like, "Oh my God," like hiding behind the corner, like, okay, I'm never going to make this mistake my brother made. And at the same time, I can go out and experience things my own way. And the way that they parent me, the way that they parented me is completely different than the way that they parented him. And I think that like, the first go around, you're like, okay, I'm kind of figuring it out, learning as we go. Second time, not saying I was parented better than my brother, but I'll just say like it was.
I think that I was.
It
like,
was
for sure.
Oh, they were. How were they on you compared to your older siblings?
Well, also because, like I said, my brother's death, I think, changed a lot for my mom. But my oldest brother once said, and I think he'll still say this, is he had more freedom at military school. He wanted to go into the military for his entire life. He went to the Marines private high school, and then he went to the Air Force Academy, and he served for a while. Still works for the Air Force. He had more freedom at military school than he did with my mom. I mean, she was very, very strict. And he respects it now, but at the time, as a 15-year-old boy, hated it. And I watched their mistakes as well. But I think my mom relaxed a lot. She was also, I think I got her at a point in her marriage when she was a lot more confident and knew that things were wrong. My dad has dealt with very, very severe mental health issues. And those are kinds of things that like she stuck with him for so long through it, and it just got to a point where it's like, was not good at all. And so they divorced. But I got to see her, one story I don't think I've ever told before is that my brother David, a week before he died, my dad had this like major blow up, blind rage, anger. I don't remember even what it was about. He threw something. It was awful. My brother came into my mom's room crying and was like, "Why are you still married to this man? Like, why do you allow him to treat us like this?" And like, I understand that he's ill. I understand that things are wrong, but this is not healthy. This isn't wrong. You're not happy. We're not happy. And he died a week later. And she was like, ripped apart. And I was 5 at the time. Yeah. And so my then childhood was totally changed. And that was like a snap for her of like, I cannot raise this child the same way. And I think constantly, with my brothers, she was battling between prioritizing, her first husband, was also, I would say, had a lot of demons, but he got brain cancer when the middle brothers were 1, and then he passed away. So my mom was dealing with like a terminally ill husband and 3 boys, and then was a single mom, and then quickly got remarried to my dad, who she knew in college, and then realized that was not what she had expected either. And so was constantly for their young adult life going back and forth between like, I have to care for the husband, I have to care for you, I have to like go back and forth. And I think she was so wound up and so stressed. And my oldest brother now totally understands that, but we were raised so differently because of it. Obviously, like, our values are the same. It was still the same mother, but the way that she, reprimanded us, the way that she, gave us opportunities, I think was very, very different. It's interesting to watch that. But I also, in ways, I felt like an only child because my brothers were 12 and 14 years older than me, but I still had that brother connection. Like, when things were really bad with my dad, my oldest brother, who's 14 years older than me, became like that father figure in a lot of ways, and has been like the support system that could not repay him for. Of like, he would be in Florida, he would answer the phone at 4 a.m. and I would be like sobbing, having some kind of panic attack over something, and he would just sit there, fly me out to him, offered, you can live with me, would get in the middle of my middle brother and I, when my brother was having like psychotic breaks and that kind of thing. Truly like stepped the hell up. And because of that, I want to have like I want to give them that, but also hopefully closer in age. But it's just, that's a kind of relationship that I don't have anywhere else. And I think it's very, very empowering. Not empowering, that's not the right word. It's just really, really meaningful.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is your older brother still in Seattle?
No, so he never moved up there. So, that was the part of the story that I never finished. But I moved to Boise. My mom was thinking that she was going to be so close to all of us. And then I moved here. My brother stayed in Florida. So now my mom was just in Idaho by herself. She was like, why did I stay here? I could have gone, back to the South. But no, so my brother's in Florida.
Okay, I was going to say that would have been a wicked coincidence because my brother's in Seattle.
Nice.
Yeah.
No, he's in Florida doing Air Force stuff.
Here's an interesting topic. What do you think about legalizing drug use? Or decriminalizing?
Gosh. It's a really, really hard subject because I have this like personal, emotional like tie to it. And so my gut reaction is like, I don't want anybody doing that. I don't want any family to have to go through what we did. But I also kind of look at it philosophically. It's like, it's not my job to tell you what to put in your body. We already know that, drinking is a toxin and that's legal, and people, drive drunk and that happens. And so, drugs are not healthy for us in, most senses. It shouldn't be my job to tell you, to dictate what you put in your body. But I also think that so many drugs are just not studied well enough. We just don't really know the long-term impacts, especially on young people. So I don't really know if I have a firm answer. For hard drugs, I'm not in favor of it. I think it's just there's too much that's unknown. I think it's incredibly dangerous for people, and purely because of and maybe that's, philosophically inconsistent. I try to stay really consistent, but I think I can be clouded by the fact that I have seen with my brother and with the people that he was on the street. And I mean, it can destroy you.
Yeah.
And we have no idea.
Yeah. See, part of me feels like if a lot of these were legalized or at least decriminalized to a certain extent, that you wouldn't have drugs laced with fentanyl and all these other randoms that could probably do more damage than if that person went like, hey, here's a trusted source. I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. At least I could go through this avenue. We could regulate it to a certain extent. We could tax it.
And I think that was my kind of where I started with all of this, and I thought that. And then one thing that kind of threw me for a loop is looking at California after they legalized weed, is that now it is so heavily regulated and taxed that illegal, marijuana growth and selling is popped back up again because it got so expensive. And the labor laws are terrible. People are dying.
But my thought is on that is that they only issued so many licenses. Yeah. And so it was like this lottery system, and whoever didn't get a license, like, well, I'm just going to do it anyway. Yeah. And I think it was a terrible system to begin with. Yeah. And seeing actually how they steal water now from the state and they do them illegally and they take water away from fighting fires is nuts to me. Yeah. But that shows me that there's a huge market for it, and they may as well embrace it.
People are going to do it anyway.
More people, make it easier for people who want to get into that to do it properly. And
I think that's where it goes back to culture, where it's, if we talk to young people who think that, drugs are harmless and that sort of thing, it's like, okay, that's objectively a lie. And maybe in some cases, it's fine. But I do think if we are able to have the tough conversations of saying, this is not like a easy fix all, you can't take this to cope and fix everything. There are drawbacks to it, just like with drinking, all of that. I think, at least in my generation, I see that people have just gotten, in my opinion, way too comfortable with it. And I think that is difficult for me. And so I think that's why I would focus more on changing the culture around it of, being more responsible if you're going to be. Because either way, when the government gets involved, it's going to be screwy regardless. Yeah. There's never going to be a perfect situation. Nobody's ever going to be happy. There's always going to be fault. The government's going to tax something too much, regulate it, not enough, whatever. And so the only thing that I can do as a person in my situation is tell, my family story, share my opinion about it, and maybe keep some kid from doing something that's like totally irresponsible, I guess.
Well, that's why I think good role models, especially online, are really important. I liked, actually, we met a while ago with the Stradman, and he's like, no alcohol, no caffeine, no nothing. I'm just like working. I'm having a great time. You don't have to do this either. Even Danny Duncan is very much against everything. And I think when he has an audience of millions of people who watch every single video, that goes a long way. Like, I guarantee some 14-year-old kid is going to...
You can't expect kids to have these role models in the same way that you can't expect a family unit to provide all of the reasonable values.
Everyone looks up to somebody, though.
Yeah, but just because they look up to somebody doesn't mean that it's a good idol. You could have a false idol, And I think that it's a tough conundrum that I've always deliberated in my head. It's like, okay, when should the government step in to take care of people? Because in my opinion, like I have a pretty anti-drug, just like philosophy in general. But at the same time, like similarly to you, it's like you want people to be able to make the choice that they want to make and have freedom. So I feel like for drug use specifically, I don't think drugs should be legalized. I think they're incredibly dangerous. No,
really, Jack.
I think they're incredibly dangerous. And I think it is so hard for me because I like to stay philosophically consistent. But at the same time, I think that some people just can't make the right decisions for themselves, and doing drugs I won't say objectively. I will not say objectively, but I think it is a terrible, terrible decision. Yeah. People have addictive personalities, and they'll make bad decisions, and it goes, you can go down a rabbit hole and screw yourself over, and everybody that cares about you too.
Where do you draw the line? At what drug? Weed. Let's start there.
Well, okay, with weed, for like I have friends that have battled with autoimmune diseases and cancer and that sort of thing. If it is like medically, like for people going through chemo, if you are given like a medical cannabis thing and it's gonna help you through chemo, I've seen that be beneficial for people. It's like, okay, I think that's different than like recreational use. But I would say like that's probably where
So you would say
draw the line on my comfort
you-
level.
That's where you
both-
draw the line?
So you both would draw the line.
I would
Are
say
we-
medical marijuana would be fine.
Really?
Yes. I think, honestly, even recreational marijuana, I'm like, well, here's the thing.
Really?
I don't think it's like super damaging, but the thing is, it becomes a lifestyle. And
Yeah,
that's the part where it becomes
yep.
damaging. It's like if you want to do it for a little escape, but at the same time, it's like,
I think
it's like a weapon.
I think
You know what I mean? It could be
potheads are the
used-
thing that like
Really? But
Yeah,
okay, from my perspective, they're happy. They don't fight each other. They're not like really getting in trouble.
well,
I see it largely as something harmless, and you know, you could argue maybe it's a gateway to other things. I don't know.
I would say, like, medically, I don't see it as harmless with what is coming out about how it changes your brain chemistry with heart stuff. Smoking weed can be detrimental for people who have, like, that's one of the reasons why I never was going to do it, because my family has this history of, you know, cardiac arrest. There are links there, especially with young people. And if you are smoking pot before your brain is fully developed, it's like we just don't have those studies because drugs have not been legalized. They really have not been studied, and we have not had, you know, the generational period, you know, to see what happens to the kids that have spent their entire, you know, teen years, college years smoking pot. What happens to them in 50 years? We just don't know, and that's like a risk that I'm not willing to take.
Well, don't we? Don't we know what happens 50 years later? I feel like
think,
a lot of adults,
I would
like
say,
50
yeah, I
to
guess
70
in the 70s
have
and that
been.
sort of thing. But again,
know.
I think that the drugs now are so different.
It's dangerous because I like to compare it to a weapon. It's like you can use it in a good way to defend yourself. You can use it as an escape sometimes if you want to like lay low and whatnot. But at the same time, you can use it to do serious harm to yourself and people around you. But at the same time, the difference between obviously like a weapon and weed is one is altering your psychology. So that's going to impair your
Okay, I
judgment
have
and
to
everything.
say-
Yeah, I say this by the way. Someone who's never done drugs,
Okay.
nothing. I've smoked weed twice,
'Kay.
2 or 3 times I think in my entire life because I was curious as
Nice.
like 16 years old.
Yeah.
that was it.
Yeah.
never anything else. But I feel like alcohol is way more harmful.
I was gonna say, okay, so I was
Yeah.
gonna bring that up. So I have a really good friend of mine who is probably the most like anti-drug person I've ever met, and like can like run circles around people. Is so intelligent, but she also gets drunker than anybody else in my life. And so that's something I brought up. And I don't really drink a lot. And honestly, I drank more before I turned 21. And I've probably, you know, could count on one hand the amount of drinks I've had since October when I turned 21. And I think I'm moving more and more towards probably stopping drinking. And I did like dry January and I loved it. I think I've had one drink since then. And it's honestly, I don't know if you've noticed with our generation, like being sober is getting like it's getting
cool
very,
again.
very popular. It's
Yes,
cool, which
it
is
is.
really exciting to me. But I'll bring up drinking a lot and I'll, you know, look at her and I'll say, so what is the difference? And she doesn't really have an answer. And it's like, it is literally a toxin. We know now there was a new report from, oh God, it was in Canada. What was the organization? It was like the Canadian like Bureau of Substance Abuse or something like that. And it talks about the links of alcohol to cancer. And even like one drink increases the likelihood of Alzheimer's and cancer. And it's like,
Doesn't it depend on the drink though? Because I've heard so many studies on wine.
like
Be
red wine, I think can
is-
be a little
yeah.
different, but still
Sure.
alcohol in general and intoxication and the impact that it has, you know, with DUIs and people, you know, being belligerent and killing people on the road and that sort of thing. And it's like, so, you know, we know, we see all these facts. So how does it differ? And I think that's one point that I get stuck on because obviously we've tried banning alcohol before. That didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I get so torn on it. And I just don't.
I just feel like people are going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
They're going to choose to do
Alcohol
it.
is
and
something
they're either,
you could make, and it doesn't take many resources to make something with alcohol.
same with weed.
True about weed, yes.
I think there's a
I lived
lot of drugs that people could
lived
just
next
like.
door to somebody in LA who was growing pot in their apartment.
Oh, whoa.
I mean, yeah.
In their apartment.
In their apartment.
Oh yeah, closets, man. You just-
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
stunk.
I've never
It
grown
stunk.
weed. I'm not really sure.
I'm just saying. I think people are going to do it regardless.
Okay,
And I think
that's-
there's-
yeah,
It
that's
makes sense to regulate tax, and offer something pure where you know you're not going to get like something laced in it that shouldn't be in there.
I do wonder though, if you change something in the government, right, to criminalize all drugs and whatnot to a higher degree, will that filter down into a cultural change? I feel like for the most part, no.
think it
but
can,
over time, if you give it enough time, it
Okay,
probably
so
will.
I think not to bring in another like very polarizing subject, but in one instance this year where I feel like I was even kind of proven wrong on the culture is downstream, or no, where I was proven wrong on the politics is downstream from culture was the Dobbs decision, so the overturning of Roe v. Wade. It was fascinating that in the like 2 months after that, you know, we saw all of these girls going on like sex strikes and saying, I'm not gonna have sex because of this. And there was a whole Washington Post article about girls my age saying like, guess I'm not going to be hooking up anymore. Like, guess casual sex isn't going to be for me because I can't do this. And, guess I'm going to have to be more safe. And it was all of these things that it's like I think about as somebody who is pro-life. And that, are in the back of my head. And I'm somebody, I don't really value hookup culture. I think it's detrimental to especially women's health and that sort of thing. And they were having, they were making all these decisions because of a law that was put in place. And then a lot of them, months on the line were like, oh, this is so healthy. Like, I need to be anti, hookup culture and that sort of thing. And I was like, okay, so I guess in many cases, it can also be downstream from politics when they are forced to, but it was it was a weird, I don't know, that was trippy for me because it was just interesting to watch them inadvertently kind of fall into like, no, this is actually healthy. But, yeah.
But in the drug case, you have to also think of enforcement and the cost of that and the cost of putting people in jail. Does someone really deserve to be in jail because they have an addiction or they have mental illness that they're coping with through drugs? And they have no violent offenses. They're minding their own business, and they got caught up because they bought something on the street that they shouldn't have been buying. It's like, is that the type of person who deserves to be in jail? Yeah. So that's what I think.
And maybe there's a difference, a different debate to be had between like legalization and then decriminalization, and then like what should be criminalized.
I think more mental health facilities. I think would be fantastic because I think a lot of these, and I don't know the statistics.
It is,
but a lot of it I think boils down to mental health.
Yeah, and I think we have a culture that on both sides of the political aisle, I don't think we know how to deal with mental health. And this is somebody, saying this as somebody who has grown up in this environment, which you guys now know a lot about. In addition to my brother, like I said, my dad has dealt with a lot. And that's been a huge part of my life of, in and out of therapy, on and off of meds and that sort of thing. Both sides of the political aisle do not know how to deal with it. Conservatives have a reputation of believing that mental health does not exist. I'm friends with a lot of people who believe that, who say it's all stupid, none of it is real. And I'm like, I literally have a brother in a hospital right now that cannot even function. I know, and obviously a lot of that is now like chemical in his brain, but it's like that is mental health. I know that it's real. I spent years in therapy. I can tell you that it's real, but I understand where you're coming from because I think so many people, especially in my generation, use it as a crutch and will self-diagnose and say, oh, I'm so depressed. It's like, no, I think you're dealing with a minor inconvenience. I think we've normalized it a little too far and trivializing it. And I think there's also this kind of social contagion of people adopting mental health things and thinking that it's kind of cool to be depressed. It's very cool to be like a tortured soul these days. But then on the left, they claim to be, very caring. We're going to fix this. But then their solutions are, Social Security and, telling people that they, affirming all of their problems rather than saying like, here are the solutions to make you get better. It's like, we'll give you, $1,200 every 2 weeks and say, yes, it's okay that you, have depression, rather than saying, no, let's fix this, because it is a lifestyle. It is something that you can take measures, whether you're going on meds or not, to make things better in your life. Even if it's literally just getting off of your phone and sitting out in the sun and eating a better diet, that does wonder for your brain.
For a lot of people.
Yes. And for some people, it doesn't. And you, like my brother, needs to be on meds. Must be on meds. And for him, it's like, I do think that there need to be better mental health resources, because for somebody like him, his only option right now is a state hospital. There is one private place in the country that I have identified that if like my mom passes away and he's in Idaho right now and I need to like step in, like as part of the, is taking care of things, there is one place that I can get him to if I don't want him to be, 11 hours away. I think he's more than that because he's a couple of hours away from her. One place. It is in Tennessee that does like intensive care. And it's private and it costs thousands of dollars. But that's something that I think about in the back of my mind of like, okay, I know that I will want to take that on, and I like agreed to take care of his estate and that sort of stuff. There's one of them. And obviously I don't think that the asylum system was great, and that's one thing that, Reagan got rid of. But, and they were obviously, they mistreated a lot of people, but there's nothing like that anymore. It's like, what happens to those people? Instead, they just end up on the street.
Yeah.
They end up abusing drugs.
That's what I've seen in Los Angeles. I think a lot of the people on the street, they're mentally ill.
Yes. And
they don't have any resources or places to turn. It's like, what are they going to do? They're on the street. It's either they get picked up by police, go to jail, get released right afterwards. That doesn't solve anything.
No. And in my opinion, just giving them cash every week also does nothing. Because you can get more money if you're crazier. I remember my brother was with like this community of homeless guys, and one of them who actually passed away a year ago, and we planned his funeral. He became a really good friend for my brother. I mean, this man was like 50 years old. He lived on the street for most of his life, was so tortured, knew that he was dying, and like took care of my brother in a lot of ways. And if Reed was in trouble, like he would call me and be like, and he would be high out of his mind and still be like, Reed's in trouble, Reed's passed out, like you need to come get him. And that's what I mean, it was incredible. But he would fake seeing like aliens and have visions in order to get more money, because the crazier you are, you get more money. And so a lot of that is like put on, because
how is that? How do they do that? How do they judge like
it's
how
like you
severe?
Like go in front of a psychologist or psychiatrist, or it's like.
But what does money help with in that scenario? Is that because like you're that much less likely to work?
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah. But then they don't actually, like my brother never tried to get a job. The people that he was around never tried to get a job. One of them got into a halfway house. You have to apply for those.
Sure.
Like the living facility that my brother was in LA, he had to apply to get in, and he had to pay like $50 a month or something like that. So he used his Social Security for that. You would get food stamps, but food stamps were separate than the Social Security cash that you were literally just given. And so there wasn't an incentive for him to do that. And when you are that mentally gone, like all he cared about was getting drugs. So if he was getting $1,200 every 2 weeks to go just smoke pot and like trip on acid and that sort of thing, like he was going to do that. And so I think, you know, as somebody who is not really in favor of a lot of government intervention, but I still think, you know, we do have these resources. I think that you're just allocating the wrong resources to these people, and you think the money is going to fix it, and then you're going to pat yourself on the back like the LA, you know, government. Like, this is so great. We're fixing all this. It's like, look at the people on your streets. They're literally suffering, and they just die there. And there's no other resources, and just giving away taxpayer dollars does nothing. And there's so many incredible organizations and nonprofits and churches that step in and try to help, but there's only so much that they can do. But then on the conservative side, I think that there is such a missed opportunity on the right, because we talk about personal responsibility and accountability, and you need to be a productive member of society and take care of your health. Like, there are all these studies that, you know, conservatives are happier than liberals. You know, conservatives take care of themselves more because they care about personal responsibility. They don't want to rely on anybody else. That is an opportunity to reach those people and say, like, you are worth more. Like, we can help you, rather than like affirming this literal illness. It should not be, hey, you don't have a problem, you're being stupid. It should be, okay, what are the necessary steps in order to get you out of this, because you deserve more, because you have more potential.
Right.
And it's like, that is such a good, whether you care about politics or not, it's like, that is what we should be giving these people. It's not just throwing them cash, being like, oh, so sorry that you are mentally ill.
So how do you make a change on that?
I have no idea. It may be cultural. I go back to like changing the conversation about it. I'm very, very open about talking with my family's mental health issues, which I think is something that is very not really seen on the right. I'm really the only person that I know of that talks about this stuff very, very publicly. I spent years in therapy. I would have like panic attacks weekly when going through stuff with my brother. And right after I got emancipated, my mom was back in Tennessee finalizing her divorce. I would have to like find my brother on the street and would like maybe see him passed out, or like he was tripping on something. Like, it was awful. And I dealt with that for years. I had therapy. Before a lot of that started, I did therapy with my brother to kind of deal with his twin's death, and we did therapy together because he only agreed to do it if I would do it with him. And then I had therapy to deal with that brother.
Wow.
So I've been in it a lot. And it's like, I know that it's real. I know people deal with it. I know that our generation is the most mentally ill generation in history. So it's like,
why?
There's so many reasons. I think social media has a lot to do with it.
Technology.
Yeah. I think that's a huge
Not
portion
being
of
like
it.
present in the real world.
Yeah.
I would say.
I think that the fear porn in the world around us, where everything, you know, the media is designed to get clicks, like you said. The world is ending, you know, everybody's worried about, you know, gun violence. People are worried about, you know, the future of this country, democracy ending. Climate is actually, it is the number one stressor for our generation. Like, there is climate anxiety, climate depression is now like an actual diagnosis that you can have. And our media like feeds into that. And so I think that's a big part of it. And it's interesting that a lot of the stressors for our generation is external rather than like, I always thought of mine as like it came from my family. It was very internal, but all of this is like all the external stuff.
I think it's just because we have more access to everything, and it's immediate.
Yeah.
And I still think it's the extremes. Like, I keep going back to TikTok. I'm just showing like the worst of the worst of the worst on either end of the spectrum, just to get like clicks, comments. I think it was on Facebook. The angrier someone gets, the more likely that is to be at the top of the page.
Yeah,
and it was anger that they went after, not fear or sadness. It was like, how angry is this going to make them to stay on here and write a comment?
And
like,
I
that's
think
what
that,
gets pushed.
you know, we can have that conversation too about like how many people are actually diagnosed with things, because we look at the stats for Gen Z and it's like our numbers are off the charts, but some of those are self-diagnosed, self-proclaimed, whatever. So I think that's another conversation. But also, like you said, we're being fed this very extreme content. So what is the impact that is having on the viewers? So then if it's constantly angry, if everybody around you is constantly depressed, they're all anxious, everybody's having this like identity crisis constantly, it's like that becomes then the norm. And whether you have that extreme or not, I just see people kind of becoming complacent and believing that that's just the norm.
Yeah. Well, speaking of extremes, what do you think of Andrew Tate?
I think that he's done good. I watch his clips and I think that he's done a lot for, some young men. I think he's an interesting figure. I think he started a lot of really important conversations. Do I think that he is like a masculine role model? No, I don't. And I think partially because I just don't love that lifestyle. I'm like, I look at a man and I don't qualify his masculinity because of how rich he is or how fast of a car he has or how many like high, S tier women he's able to get.
Even if it's a Bugatti, though.
Well, yeah, do not care. Like, I would rather you drive a truck or some kind of Bronco and be a normal guy and have really great values. And like, I don't care how many cigars you smoke. And so I think that kind of turns me off a bit. Maybe that's very superficial, but I'm like, you're not appealing to me. But I understand that guys like that. And I understand that it's like, cool for them and that sort of thing. And maybe you can, I don't know what you think about him, but I know I have guy friends who are like, oh, he's so cool. Like, he's making me feel like empowered and he's speaking to me.
Part of me is shocked that people can't see, like I see in terms of politics, I see both sides equally. And I'm like, I love these things about this. Yeah. And I love these things about this. And we could like bring them together. Yeah. But I don't identify necessarily with one or the other. I just kind of pick and choose bits and pieces, but I do the same thing with people. It's like I might disagree with some things they say, but I'm like, that one thing, I kind of like that. Yeah. And I'll pick and choose from that. Do you think people have the ability to do that, though? Because it seems like now it's less about saying, I like this one thing about this person, and I agree with like taking accountability.
I think people are more close-minded when they get a little bit younger, though. So like I think like our generation, Gen Z, is like they like you either hate them or you love them. Yeah. But for an older generation, I feel like it's much different. There's more older.
Like
older.
Am I older?
You're a millennial, right?
I'm a millennial.
You are older. There you go.
True.
Like I got flamed. Actually, it wasn't terrible, but I definitely did see some pushback in my comments because I was talking about Jeffree Star, and he, was talking about, gender binary and that kind of thing, and he came out and he was saying like the they them stuff, it just doesn't make sense, and he's also spoken out against, gender transitions for children, saying they're not ready for that sort of thing. And so I made a video and I said, obviously this YouTuber has a lot of controversy. He's done a lot of stuff. People hate him for many reasons. But this is something that we can commend, at least that my audience can commend. He's saying protect children. There we go. And people were like, no, but he's done all this like other stuff. And I don't like him. I'm not like, rah, Jeffree Star, I love all your videos. But I'm like, hey, that was a good thing. And I think some, conservatives also think that means like you're bending the knee, you're compromising your values. I'm like, no, I'm not becoming a fan. I'm just acknowledging when somebody does something that, might be beneficial for a listener, might open up their eyes to something new. And I think it's the same thing with Andrew Tate, like you're saying. His lessons and his messages of, taking accountability as a young man and speaking to young men and saying, I know it's hard for you right now. I know that, modern feminism, tells you need to be effeminate and like all of this stuff. Like, I know it's tough, but here are some of the things that you could do. Do I like the way he speaks about women? No, I don't. I think it's very weird. And obviously, there's a lot of back and forth about what he was doing in Eastern Europe or whatever. I don't love the way that he's spoken about that. Like, I remember he said, I think it was about sex trafficking or no, it was like, he doesn't condone rape, but, in some countries it's technically legal. So, and I was like, well, like there's still a moral wrong there. There's still a moral wrong. I think that kind of goes back to like, even if something's legal or whatever, I'll still, I would believe that it is wrong. So I obviously don't support those things, but I think he's had viral moments and I think he has started important conversations online. Maybe that's how I would kind of frame it.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. I think he's a disruptor, and I think disruptors are extremely needed because it's super easy to
that's
just
a good
go
way to
with
put
the
it.
flow.
Yeah. It's kind of like
he gained a lot more power than I feel like you should probably give to a disruptor just in general, because usually disruptors are more extreme and you don't want someone super extreme to be like exactly, but there's more gravitational pull with people that are extreme like him, so it makes sense. What I noticed with Andrew Tate, people that like are around me that are like big Andrew Tate fanboys, is the fact that he kind of gave that whole victimhood mentality to dudes which a lot of people don't really see, but that's what I saw because he was like, it's hard to be a dude. Dudes are depressed at rates that have never been seen before and stuff like that. And guys are like, oh my God. And everybody.
Yeah.
I don't want to say everybody wants to be a victim, but a lot of people, it's easy to be a victim because then you have an excuse. So people were like, okay, yeah, this sounds good. And then he's like, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. And people were like, oh, wow, that's cool. And every dude wants to be a hero. And he's basically teaching you how to be a hero.
Into the fear.
But I think he offers some like solutions. I think he acknowledges like, things are tough. And I think you brought up an important point because I kind of struggle with, talking to, my audience of like young men and young women and saying like, you have it really bad and this like society is so screwed up. But I try to make it pretty even. Talking about like the boy crisis, because I also think that there is a huge like young woman crisis. Like there's a reason why the majority of young people transitioning right now are girls. Like there's a reason why like I think girls committing suicide at a young age is now above. I mean, it's like girls have so many issues. As like a young girl, I knew what it was like. I understand going through puberty and literally feeling like you don't belong in your body and what's going on and all of this stuff. But I think only telling people that you are a victim and that people hate you is not the best. And so I do think with things like Andrew Tate, it was like, I wish that he had offered more solutions in a way of like.
All it was like, get rich buying my program and also work out, which is great.
Get a six pack. Yes. That was very interesting advice. But it's like,
I think that's good.
But at the end of the day,
I agree.
Let's go to the gym.
Yeah.
Go to the gym and bring value.
Yeah.
But also get rich and get like a harem of women. Which I feel like is
like, okay.
Yeah, it's like, okay, we can take what we want, the ideas that we want to serve us.
But by making money, you're adding value in some way. You're
being a productive member of society.
It could bring a lot of purpose depending on what you're doing. If you're adding value to somebody else, it could be setting goals.
I don't think money brings purpose.
But I'm saying if you're doing something of value,
you are making money.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Not the money itself, but like to bring value, you have to be doing something to society. You have to be doing something of value, hopefully.
Yeah.
To do that.
No, I think that there are really good takeaways and really poor takeaways for Tate. Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think the best way that you said it was a disruptor, and I agree we need more of those because I think people get so caught up in this very polarized groupthink. And I think if one person on, other sides pops through and is like, I disagree with this, and it causes like massive whatever, it starts conversations, whether or not that changes people's minds. I think polarizing figures like Joe Rogan is a great example, and he's somebody that's kind of wrote it really well, I think. Of like, he's unafraid to say things that are super controversial and have people on that are, controversial and opening up those conversations, and he'll say something every once in a while. People are like, oh my God. But you like him so much now he's gained this audience, and it's like, okay, you respect it. But I think having those people pop up is so important for this culture where everybody is so terrified to say something that is out of line. And it's like, that isn't what it should be.
Now, how do you balance that, though, between maybe, because you have a very big audience at this point. A lot of people listen to what you have to say. How do you balance your own thoughts and think, maybe I have some biases here. How do I present both sides? Because my whole thinking with my channel is generally presenting both sides and letting people come to their own decision. Be like, here's for and against. I kind of somewhere in the middle, but I'll let you decide. How do you go about that?
I think for the most part, I will try to explain my bias. And so, like, for example, if we're talking about drugs, I will explain my family's history with that. If I'm talking about something like as a young woman where I have a personal experience, I will explain that. And I try to be as personal as possible. And it obviously, like, I walk a fine line because, I am a public figure now, and so people, get a lot of insight into my life, but you kind of have to draw that line of, like, how far am I willing to take it? And I think the best way I've described it is, like, there's a point where, like, online Brett ends and, like, real life Brett kind of continues, and I, decide when I'm keeping private. But for the most part, I try to be totally transparent so that people know exactly where my biases come from.
Sure.
Because if you don't know, then it's just me as like some idol telling you what to think. But if you understand how I have come to the conclusions that I have come to, that is the thing that I respect in listening to the people, that I listen to. So for instance, when I'm listening to Ben, understanding his religion and his values and his culture makes so much sense. And it's like, oh, I relate to you. I understand. Obviously, I don't relate because I'm not a Jew, but it's like, I can understand how you have come to this conclusion. And I think that creates more of a human-to-human connection, which is always what I'm trying to achieve, is like appealing to emotion. And then also, I always try to leave people with a more empowering message. And so maybe that makes me, I'll, land on one side or the other, but I will usually try to land with the thing that does, make people most empowered, it makes them turn against a victim mentality.
Sure.
And so if there's an opportunity to present that, it's less about politics and more about, as I've said before, you are deserving of more, you can do more, and you are holding yourself back. If you are claiming that you are oppressed, 9 times out of 10 in this society, it is because you are doing it yourself, whether that is like physically or your mindset. And that is something that I don't think should be political. It sadly has become political anymore. And so if I can encourage my audience to just push themselves even more, then I would do that. But I think with the biases part of it, it's just explaining my own.
And how often do you change your opinions on something? Because you're mentioning debates a lot.
Yeah.
At what point, or maybe give us some examples of sometimes where you've debated and come away from it being like, you know what, they have some great points. I agree.
I think drug legalization has been one that I've struggled with because I came probably, in the last few years, I think I've become more pro, or I guess more anti-drug legalization, even though I had my own, family's history with it. As I just learned more about the impacts of, legalizing it, what happened, the impact on other people outside of my own bubble, because I was just kind of thinking of it in my family's bubble. And so I thought that's probably not the best way to look at it. And being around people who, have differing opinions, and I've, tried to debate people who are, not pro legalization, and I just kept falling short. I was like, okay, so maybe that is a sign, especially when morally I kind of lean that way. But I think the biggest one was I used to be pro-choice. And I was, in my heart, morally, I knew that was something I could never do. That was never something I would do. I knew that it was objectively wrong. However, I always, thought of it as there are 2 lives that are at stake here. We're talking about the mother, we are talking about the baby. And if I am somebody who is anti-government intervention, I don't want the government telling me what to do with my life, my body, why do I have any say over what, this woman is doing, and I don't know her life experience, whatever.
Right.
But then I'm just leaving this unborn child with no, whatever. So it was very, very complicated for me, but as somebody who at the time I was a lot more libertarian, and I still think that I probably lean a little bit more that way than a lot of people that I'm around. I have very conservative values, but I think I can fluctuate on that when it comes to how far I want to legislate that. But anyway, then I got to UCLA, and I started to see the pro-choice people that I was around were not really just pro-choice, they were pro-abortion. And that was kind of when Miley Cyrus did the abortion cake, and it was literally celebrating abortion.
But do you think maybe that you saw the extremes on that side, and that maybe a lot of people land somewhere else in the middle, but you just don't see them?
Yes.
Yeah.
And there are, the majority of people in this country, I believe, would, support abortion up to a certain point, and they do believe that there need to be restrictions upon it. So I know that there are people there who understand that this cannot be, extreme. But as I'm thinking about it on a cultural level, the fact that just in the last few years, people getting so pro-abortion, they are so angry about this issue that they just take it to the extreme, that they are the media. And I think that the media, is a lot to blame for this, because they just stoke this fire over and over again. Yeah. And so I put a lot of the blame on them, but it is, creating this entire culture of people that, whether intentionally or unintentionally, are becoming so just angry and pro killing something. And it's how did we get here from saying, I just want autonomy, to now the majority of the rhetoric that comes out about this is pro-abortion. It's like the Jessa Duggar story that just happened a couple of weeks ago, where she had a miscarriage, and the 10 media outlets that covered it all said that it was an abortion. It was it wasn't. You just saw this woman crying on YouTube for 18 minutes about her miscarriage. How it was a missed miscarriage, and she had to have a D&C to have the fetus removed because she did not pass it naturally. And you're saying that because she did that, it's an abortion. It was not. And they're she's lying about it. It's so you're using this story, twisting somebody's personal experience for your agenda. And it's that's where I had a major problem with it.
Sure.
Then it doesn't seem genuine. So I saw a lot of that at school. I saw, my sorority sisters who were on abortion number 2 because they weren't on birth control, and just saw it as kind of a backup plan. Oh yeah, it's fine, I'll just use it as birth control. And then the kicker for me was learning that my dad wanted me to be aborted. And that was my parents' marriage, by the time that I was conceived, was already over. My mom knew that she wanted a divorce.
Wow.
She stayed because of me, and we can argue whether that was a good thing or not a good thing, and we talk about that a lot, about what that would have changed in my childhood and that sort of thing, and I'm happy with how things turned out. But
how did you learn about that? Where did that seems like a tough
yes, so that was
thing to
never
ever
told
hear.
to me, but I was calling my mom about abortion, and I was I'm just so conflicted right now, because I was this is something I could never do. I know that I could not. I know that it's morally wrong, and we were going back and forth, and my mom is incredible at showing both sides of it. And so she would argue it kind of play devil's advocate, and she would argue it from, the perspective of the mother. She would argue it from, overprotection of the unborn child. All of this would go back and forth. What makes the most sense? I mean, and this is something she's changed her opinion on a lot because she used to be pro-choice as well. But I mean, back and forth, hours of talking about this of like, I just don't, it's such a complicated issue that deserves so much empathy and so much grace. And I think people on both sides of the political aisle just do not give it that. There's some people on the right as well who, villainize mothers who have had abortions. I'm like, that's not freaking productive either. And there are so many people who literally do not think that they have another option. And it is our job to show that there is another option and to amplify, the pregnancy centers and, the resources that are available to you because they, outnumber abortion clinics. They actually, like, on paper, they do. And, you can have these resources. And so, anyway, that's just a whole aside, but we would go back and forth, and I was like, I just don't know where I land, and I was really torn up about it. And she was like, I'm going to, be very personal with you, and she was like, when, we found out that I was pregnant, Mike wanted you to be aborted, and she was like, we knew our marriage was over. This wasn't obviously planned at all, and he was like, I want you to make an appointment and go. And she was like, that totally changed my mind, because she said, I had not even considered that this would impact me personally. I was a mother of 3. That would never be a concern of mine. And she said, having like a life inside of me and being told that like I would end that. She was like, after going through multiple pregnancies and like in that moment feeling I knew that was never anything that I could do. And I think then her perspective shifted because for her it had always been about the rights of the mother. And she was like this is somebody that, is the most vulnerable person in our society, who literally has no autonomy, that is fully dependent on this other person. And I think that is where her perspective shifted. And for me, making it very, very personal, it was just like, okay, that's, it did a lot.
Yeah. Don't you think saying that, though, would automatically push you to one side? Like that, you can't get more personal than that.
I don't think so, because a lot of people will say, like, they've had an abortion and they still support it. I was watching a video at one point and a girl was like, yeah, my parents almost aborted me. I wish that they did. It probably would have been better for my mom, and that kind of thing. So I know that there are people who have different responses and maybe they are already predisposed to that opinion.
That's fair.
But as somebody who was already predisposed to that pro-choice opinion, it was interesting that that's just like flipped me over.
Do you
but I
wish
also,
you hadn't heard that?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Because I think it gave me a lot more empathy for my mother for what she was dealing with at the time with my father. It obviously created another fraction with my dad's and my relationship. That's water under the bridge now, and we've talked about it, and he would never have suggested that now, and he came from a place of fear and anger and that sort of thing. But I'm glad that I did, because it gave me a greater perspective about the way I was raised, the dynamic. I've had a lot of confusions with my relationship with my dad, and I just didn't understand a lot of stuff. And I think that as I got older, the transparency that my mom, gave me about my family and being able to, like, I wasn't really shielded from a lot. And some people would say that that was a bad thing, but I think that it forced me to grow up quickly, but it also, like, I knew what to expect in my family. I understand why I am the way I am because of my family. Like, none of that was hidden from me. So no, I'm not upset that I learned that.
Got it.
Yeah.
What do you think is the biggest threat to humanity right now?
Oh gosh, ourselves. People's
How
mindset.
do you mean?
People's mindset.
What about their mindset?
I would say people are so desperate to be, I've said it a lot today, but they are so desperate to be victims. And I think that they're, like, as a society, we're holding ourselves back. Whether that is, and I think a lot of the victimization is fueled by a desperate need for attention, because victims get attention.
You know what? I think it's acceptance, because it's easier to be a victim, and other victims love to wallow in misery.
I think that's
what
a
is
good
it?
way.
Misery loves company.
Yes,
so when
exactly.
you're upset and you could gossip with someone else and say, this sucks and blah, 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 and go back and forth, you feed off that. And you feel like, I'm not alone. And I had that feeling of
that
just
community.
like, yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's, as you begin to get more successful, it becomes harder and harder to find those connections.
Yeah, exactly. But I will say I do think attention is part of it, because we've seen that, like, the marginalized communities that say that they're marginalized, they get a lot of attention. It pays to be an activist. It's like that sort of thing. And so I don't think that is the case for everybody, because obviously not everybody ends up making money in that. But I think that there are a few examples that glorify it, where people are like, oh, this is cool. Like, I will get the attention. I will get this community. I will be affirmed. I will be accepted into this because I'm not alone. And I think that there's a lot of, very, hurting people. And I think that as a society, we have, allowed that mentality to take prevalence. And so if I could leave, people with one message, is that, being empowered is the most like freeing thing that you can do for yourself. Saying I don't care what other people think is the most freeing thing that you can do for yourself. Being self-reliant, there's literally no better feeling. Like me walking out on the street knowing that I can beat somebody up because I did years of self-defense, that I like carry a gun, that I'm totally self-reliant. I don't depend on, you know, a family, mommy and daddy's, anything like that, that I am total. It's like the most empowering thing in the world. And there's literally no better feeling. And it's like, why would I sacrifice that just to be like accepted by a group of people that is also like down in the dumps and not productive and not.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I would say, I think it's ourselves.
Interesting.
And also elites and government toying with our lives. I would say it's like at the very base level of society, because I don't think we push ourselves like forward as a culture. But I also do have to admit that, you know, there are people that do not have our best interests at heart, because all they want to do is make more money and be more corrupt and have more power.
Well, that's why I think it's important to teach objective thinking. I would love a common sense class, just like taught in school. Like this is bad, this is good, but make common sense choices for you.
Yeah.
And just pick, like we were talking about earlier, picking and choosing like the bits and pieces that you identify with, I think is really important.
And I think that people overlook the importance of like logic classes and ethics classes. And I'm so grateful that I took those in college. One of the most important classes I ever took also was political philosophy. Understanding where my opinions come from on a philosophical level was so important to me. Having to advocate, like I remember having to write a paper in support of Marx, which is like the farthest thing that I could have ever like done, but having to get into that mindset and understanding like on a human level, why are they driven in this way? What were the benefits of this ideology? And having to learn all that, seeing every single slide, especially if you have a really good professor. I did all of those classes at community college. It was exceptional. But I did logic, I did ethics, I did political philosophy, and then I did a couple of other like political theory classes. They were incredible because I had to do every single slide. But I was also in a good situation where, you know, they also had people like Nozick pop up, who was like the father of libertarianism. We talked about Ayn Rand and like her, you know, philosophy behind. So I was getting both sides, and I had to advocate for and against things that I like loved and believed, and things that I hated. That's
the one class I wanted to take was debate.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's such a useful thing to know.
Yeah. And debating is a skill.
Yes.
Because even if your idea might trump somebody else, like...
if you can't communicate that to another person.
Like, I know you're going to meet with Hassan Piker. He's an incredible debater because he's fast.
What do you think is more important in debate? Do you think it's the actual stuff that's coming out of your mouth, like the words, the transcript, or do you think it's the ability to use rhetoric?
It's the ability to use rhetoric. I would say, like, my opinion isn't necessarily like swayed, because I will always try to, I don't think that my opinion like quickly changes in debate, but I think who you determine like wins. I think most people pick and choose who wins a debate because of the rhetoric, not because what's being said. I think when you're writing, I think that's a different thing because it's so much slower. But when you are back and forth with somebody, it is the ability to be very, very nimble with your diction. And there's a reason why it's like literally a skill. Yeah,
and confidence. I feel like if you go in with confidence and you don't take anything personally and you remain objective, that's what I think does it. Whoever sounds more confident in their belief, I think generally
and doesn't take any BS and doesn't give in. And that's why it's like, I might be a terrible debater because I'm always somebody who's like, oh yeah, tell me more. Like, oh, I like, you let me understand.
See,
and that
I
sort
always
of thing.
go in thinking that I could be wrong. Yeah. I just think like, hey, I'm open-minded to a lot of things, and I'm okay to change my opinion if it's wrong. So like, I'll hear the other side and be like, you know what, there's some good points in that. Like, I'm open to it. So I'd be a terrible debater.
I want to hear more about your anti-porn stuff.
Oh god.
All right, here we go. I also think that porn is one of the things that is destroying my generation.
Why is it so bad?
Okay, so first of all, with the porn industry, we know that like it is fueled by criminal activity. I mean, the sex trafficking industry is like funneled through porn. Pornhub is dealing with, I mean, at this rate, 10 plus 15 lawsuits. Children being molested, put on the site. It is a breeding ground for terrible behavior. For women, I think we are fed this lie. That you can, as women, I think that we are fed this lie that you can have this super happy and productive and like fulfilling life by just selling your body. It will not be that way. You look at the mental health of sex workers, you look at the mental health of, you know, porn stars. It's not good. There's like the 1%, like on OnlyFans, who makes, you know, they make millions of dollars and they're great. And that, you know, will sustain them whenever they stop doing this kind of work. But for the majority of them, it is a terrible, terrible, terrible industry.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here. And very much devil's advocate. Okay.
Yeah.
Graham's laughing.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think a lot of people, they fall into the porn industry because it's just like, by happenstance, I may as well do this. I can make a good buck here.
100%.
So I could see why that would probably not work very well mentally for people.
Yeah.
It's like falling into something where, like you said, selling your body. But those that do intentionally move into the industry, and they know that that's something that they enjoy, don't you think in that situation? I guess you did allude to the 1% of people.
Yeah,
but
if it works for you, then that's fine. And I will never say to your face, like, you are lying to yourself about it, because I'm sure that there's some people that just like genuinely don't care and they have a good experience with it. But I think on a whole, and looking at like the entire gender, like women are not, you know, and maybe this goes back to like hookup culture and that kind of thing. But when you look at men and women, men are biologically designed to go sow the seeds. There's a reason why you do not carry a child for 9 months. For women, it's like, I need to find this one specific partner. I can only be pregnant for 9 months. Like, I can only carry, basically, you know, I can only have one pregnancy at once. I have to protect these eggs. I only have, you know, a set amount of eggs that I'm, you know, created. And so we are very, very protective over that. With men, you are literally designed to go repopulate the earth, literally. And so with women, there's a reason why, like, biologically, hookup culture and just sleeping with a bunch of people and leaning into that. And I guess, you know, porn is a little bit different, but still this like sex positive culture for women, I don't think it's healthy, because it's going against how I believe we are literally biologically designed. And I think for young men, it is allowing them to be complacent with just living online and not having real relationships. Like, the violence in marriages has like also, I mean, I'll finish that thought and then go into it. But I mean, like, violence in relationships, domestic abuse has like skyrocketed with the normalization of porn. Often in domestic abuse situations, the man is like addicted to porn or has a history with it. 52% of divorces in this country cite porn as an issue, which is just an insane stat. But it makes sense, because if you're unhappy and you're trying to find fulfillment or pleasure somewhere else, you're going to go that way. But I was reading this Reddit post from this person. They were arguing the benefits and the drawbacks between OnlyFans and Pornhub, and they were arguing that OnlyFans was better. And one of the arguments for OnlyFans being better was because they were subscribing to an individual girl and they could create this like parasocial relationship with her. And it's like, it feels better because I'm not really objectifying her, and we have a relationship, we can chat and I can feel better. It's like, then go out into the real world and ask a girl on a date. Like, porn is allowing young men to stay in front of their computers and not strive for anything else. Like, overuse of porn, over the masturbation, it fucks with your hormones. Like, biologically, it has impacts. Mentally, men who are porn addicted, who even just are not even porn addicted but watch copious amounts of porn, are mentally very, very unhealthy. Like, it is not natural. And it's just like... And then on top of it, with the industry being so dangerous, it's like, why is this something that we have just become, you know, so accustomed to? And it's happened really fast. Like, my mom and I were talking about it. My producer, Matt Scheller, who never, but my former producer who doesn't work here anymore, he was in his 40s. We were talking about, like, with he and my mom, where if you wanted to watch adult content 40 years ago, 30 years ago, you had to go to a theater and you had to watch, you know, with a lot of people. Like, there was a reason why, I'm forgetting who the actor was that was like arrested for masturbating in a theater, like in an adult film. Or then later on with like Blockbuster and that sort of thing, you had to go into like the adult section and you know, were in public renting it out and that sort of thing. But it has become more and more private, where now it is literally on your phones. You can do a quick Google search. It is so at people's fingertips that there is now not really a stigma around it. Women are almost like encouraged to go into it in a lot of ways. You look at, you know, things online, you see girls that, you know, were making millions, you know, basically objectifying themselves and, you know, selling their bodies. Is almost appealing. With men, it's become so commonplace. You know, boys start seeing porn when they're like 13 years old. I saw porn for the first time when I was, I think, probably 14 or 15. It's become so normalized so quickly. And that is like the most shocking thing to me. And I also think, in a similar way as we were talking about like the culture around smoking weed, I do think that there's like a culture around young men who just sit in their homes and they just watch porn.
I do agree. I think the accessibility to porn is the real issue. Porn itself, I don't know if that's like a huge issue. If guys know exactly what they're doing and they're very intentional about it, and the girls that go into the business are very intentional about going to the business, they feel pride with what they do. I feel like there's probably no problem with that.
Well, I would say there is a problem with sex trafficking, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
I think now Pornhub, don't they verify IDs?
You can still get around. That's still like I mean, Netflix is about to drop a whole documentary, I think, next month, literally just about the sex trafficking part of
trafficking,
Pornhub.
objectively.
Yeah.
Of course. That's a bad part. I'm just talking on the theory of porn itself.
Yeah, but something that's crazy to me is that laws are just now being put in place where you have to verify your age to get on Pornhub. Like before, it was like you could just put in any birthday and get on and watch it. States are just now rolling out, you need to verify. Like if I was verifying my student discount on Spotify, putting in a student ID, whatever.
Imagine a data breach. Like if we can't trust Equifax. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
There's lists you don't want exposed. Imagine going through the list and just like Control F and like.
How are they going to check IDs and everything? Like you submit a photo of your.
You scan it.
Wow.
And then there's the debate that a lot of people will agree that Pornhub and sites like Pornhub is objectively bad because they do not protect their creators. It's dangerous. It's just slipped up one too many times. So people say like OnlyFans is better. OnlyFans was not created as a like adult content site. It was created as like Patreon without any kind of like content regulations. They are not a sex site, and they're very, very clear about that. So they do not have any protections in place for their creators.
Well, I thought that the way around that was for their banking by saying like, hey, we don't just focus on this, we allow anything, and that's one of the ways around how they can get like lines of credit and a bank account and stuff like this.
Exactly. But also they were started initially, it was during COVID that it blew up as like a sex site because sex workers like escorts didn't have jobs during COVID, so they created OnlyFans. And people think that it is safer because of that, or that it's like feminist porn because women are producing it themselves, but it is often more dangerous because there are no regulations on the site because it is not an adult site. So OnlyFans has no way to report if like there's some guy that's trying to pimp you out. They do not have many verification things. There's all of these studies, mainly in the UK, of looking at kids who have gotten onto OnlyFans as creators or as consumers, because their age verification, you can submit an ID that is not yours and still get an account. So if you could like there was this like story of a girl who used her aunt's ID, made an OnlyFans, and at 17 or 16 years old was doing OnlyFans content and then got exploited, like some crazy guy like found her and like a bunch of stuff. So they just do not have those protections. So like if the industry itself is not even safe, like I understand like you have a right to do whatever work you want to.
Devil's advocate.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I don't think that I don't think it's healthy for society as a whole. I don't think that that's doing anything good for any of us, but it's like I get it if you want to, that's your prerogative.
Let's say what about prostitution? Because don't they say that's the okay? All right.
Let's go back to porn.
Jack.
Go back to porn.
Jack's
okay.
Very passionate.
So is it the culture of porn itself, or is it porn in general?
I think it's both.
So
Like
I agree. I
I
think
think
the culture around porn, yes, is extremely toxic and it's very bad. Probably an objective bad, right?
Yeah.
Let's take porn itself. Okay.
So like the
with
actual
two
videos.
very intentional two very intentional people consenting into this whatever transactional relationship.
Yeah.
How is that bad?
If they are doing that, then I guess that's fine. Like if you want to make videos in your own home, I guess maybe it's the selling of it. I don't know.
But what is it exactly about the selling of it? Because people sell their bodies in other ways.
That's very true. I guess I think in my mind that goes back to the industry. Like, will there ever be a safe way to present that pornography?
But if
where
there
the
was,
creators,
then it would probably be okay in the mind of Brett Cooper.
I think on a moral level, I would still say no. Because
I think you value intimacy and having something that's like you feel is protected and is yours and is sacred.
I do too.
And I think that's something.
I 100%. I value intimacy. I value all of that stuff too. But at the same time, I'm very much the type where I don't want to be telling people that know what they're going into, what they should and shouldn't be doing. And that's where I think.
I think in a perfect world where it was totally safe, maybe. I can't give a solid answer because I still do not believe that it is a good for society. I think people are on a whole negatively
It is a bad for society. I would probably agree with that, yeah.
And also,
just because the culture it trumps all.
And I think it's for the viewers, but also I would look at the people who, even if they are, consenting individuals, I would still look at that and be like, as Brett Cooper, I don't think you're making the right decision.
Yeah.
Like if I had control over your life, I would say, do not do that. It is not going to be healthy for you in the long run. Like you are literally blowing up your reputation.
What's unhealthy about it? Do you
because
feel
you're
from
selling...
the actresses or actors' perspective?
Yeah. I guess I keep going back to number one, the industry is like very dangerous, but also on an emotional level, if you are just selling the most,
it takes tolls just after time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like mentally, emotionally, you are selling like the most biologically intimate thing that you can do, and you're putting like a price tag on. Like after that, what else do you have to give? It's like you are literally breaking through every barrier. Like, you have no privacy. Like, this is the most intimate thing that you can do. I will never say that that is objectively healthy.
So it goes against biology.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, this is the most objectively private, intimate thing that we are now like commercializing and selling. I will never say that that could ever be healthy.
So you would say biological truths are axiomatically correct morally.
Yes.
What did you just say? I'm so lost on that.
Okay, that's something
so-
I would actually kind of agree with to a certain extent. Okay, so just so everyone knows, okay, because I feel like people are gonna start thinking like, oh, Jack, he's like this crazy porn guy, whatever. Okay, because we've had 2 porn stars on the show before.
Okay.
And people said that it looked like I fell in love with the porn stars when I came on the show, which is not the case.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's like what the viewers got basically out of that. I have a very intense stare.
Yeah. Really listening intently to
I do, but like I agree. Porn culture is extremely dangerous. And I think porn itself, if you're just taking 2 consenting people, I think that's probably fine. I'm not this crazy porn person, in case if you guys watching are wondering, okay, I don't even watch porn. I will say openly, I used to watch porn. And you know this, Graham. I don't watch porn anymore. No, and I've found my
that's
life.
incredibly admirable.
Thank you.
It's very, very hard to do. It's also very, very rare to find men that will openly say that.
That you used to watch porn or that you quit porn?
Yeah, both.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that you like used to and that you quit, or that you like actively don't. That's very rare. And I'm somebody that like brings it up. I'm like, so let's talk about that. And it's like,
See, I feel neutral. Like I just don't care either way. I think if two people are consenting and they're not hurting anybody, I'm all for it.
Right.
I think there's a place for it. I think there's a marketplace.
I think there's a market for it, but
and
you
if we
also
go
have
back
to think
to
on the side of the consumer. Some people
if
are
you get
able
rid
to
of the
perfectly.
market, if you get rid of like the audience
then,
for it,
but then it's going to
it goes
go
away?
underground. Then there's going to be something else that
I
pops
wasn't
up.
meaning like making it illegal or whatever.
Yeah.
But if like the culture changes and we start to kind of like in a similar way to how like sobriety is very, very cool now. Like there's all of these like mocktail bars that are opening up and that sort of thing. It's like if the culture starts changing around it, the market starts changing.
I still think that's such a small subset.
Yeah.
Like the mocktail industry, I think that's so cool. Macy she ordered a mocktail for I had no idea those things existed, and I tried it. It was actually really cool. Like
That's what I do.
like it. But I see these changes, but I think it's such a small part of the market. Like what,
But
10%?
I still
Even
have,
5%
I still have
would
hope
be.
for that because I still see it as like a productive change. And I still see those people as people that are going out and having conversations in their community and maybe changing minds or, opening people up to a new thing. And I think that that's exciting. But I do put a lot of fault on the consumers because if there was not such a porn culture and consumption of porn, there would not be a market for it. People would not go into it thinking that it was some kind of
But what about
Everything you
prostitution?
said-
Because isn't that the oldest profession? Don't they call that?
I think so. Yeah, I would say. I don't
So isn't
support
that? But isn't that?
prostitution?
But I know. But isn't that similar on a similar way?
Yeah, but just because it's existed for a long time
but
doesn't
shouldn't that-
necessarily make it.
But I feel like that should also be legal. I mean, if two
Okay, but here's the
consenting
thing.
adults are want to enter into a business arrangement,
I probably agree prostitution should be legal. Yeah, and you probably disagree with this, but I just think people, give them the right to do whatever they
Yeah.
want. For the most part, yeah.
I think
In a
that
safe place, of course.
again, I always go back to the industry around it of like, and maybe
Yes, of course,
the
the industry.
argument that it's like that, it's legal and there's more, protections and all of that stuff. Maybe it could be a different thing. But just because something has been around for a long time or has been done, in my mind, does not make it right or morally right. So I look at that and I still think that I don't think that people should be doing. I don't think that that's the healthy thing to do. Would I legislate that? I don't know. That's why I would never be a politician because I like to be able to have nuanced conversations. I think I would be in a terrible position. But I do believe that it is unhealthy for people. I believe that, selling your body is unhealthy. I believe that paying for sex is unhealthy. And so I will never advocate for something.
I would say it's unhealthy and everything. But technically, in the bigger picture, when you consider the entire timeline of humanity, slavery has only not existed for a very short period of time. So just
And
because
that's
something is
crazy to me to think about.
Exactly.
And it still does exist in many countries.
Oh,
Yes,
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I will say this though. I just want to make sure we wrap this up. Okay. If you guys want to quit porn, I would encourage it. I saw my life improve, and I want to openly
Why?
say this because
Why
it's
is your
an
life
uncomfortable
improved, Jack?
conversation. Because I know my grandma watches this. Hopefully, she's not going to be tuned
Hey,
in
Gigi.
this long. Gigi,
Say
hello.
hi,
hours
Gigi.
in.
Yeah.
Say hi, Gigi.
Hello, Gigi. My dad sometimes watches. Sorry, Dad. But yeah, I don't watch porn, and I've saw my life extremely drastically improve. And the way that I saw it improve, I don't want to go into too much detail, but mostly I think that I stopped seeking instant gratification with certain things, and I started seeing the world through a lens of okay, I'm in this for the long haul. I want to find someone. I want to settle down.
So
and
you felt like that was holding you back from finding somebody?
it definitely made me so much less motivated to try to find someone. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Because you got that instant gratification.
Exactly. And then you're
like,
good.
why would you need to have
Yeah.
a real life woman?
Yeah, it's just
when
like,
you have a nice...
okay, we're good for the day. Let's, or for whatever interval of time it was. Okay, I'm not disclosing too much right here. Yeah, we're good for the minute. No.
And that is the experience of a lot of men. And if you look at like the studies about, especially men, but it's interesting now because there's so many more women that are,
But here's the thing.
porno.
My argument on that is boredom. When you're bored, you look for things to do. When you're working and you're
that's
and
the
you're-
most
you're
dangerous
on
one is when it gets to boredom.
An idle mind.
But I'm saying, but if someone is like on a mission and they have stuff to do and they're busy and they're working and they're doing something productive, that's not something you think about. It's like when you're bored, there's nothing to do.
Well,
and you just
boredom,
feel
I will
like-
say, the contrarian opinion right here, I think boredom is actually extremely productive. And I think during boredom, when you're in solitude and you're like not being like
Allowing kids to be bored is, I think, one of the like
100%. Yeah, being
Really?
exposed
I
to like
hated it.
technology
I
and
don't
all
know.
that stuff. I think being bored is extremely powerful.
It forces you to
Very
like
good.
create your own fun.
Yeah, and introspect and like question your beliefs, which I think people just don't do nowadays.
Yeah.
And I think that's like one of the biggest problems, open-mindedness and questioning your own beliefs. Absolutely.
I don't know. I hate boredom. I just think a lot of this could be distilled
I don't think
down to like
I don't think it's like people love boredom. Like I don't think it's necessarily something to love, but I would say like it yields. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think a lot of this can be taken down to when someone has stuff to do, they're less likely to partake in things that are maybe not the most productive for them.
I think it's a symbiotic relationship where like both, if you obviously like if you're occupied all the time, you're working all the time, probably not going to do this, but at the same time, if you refrain from this, it's probably going to somehow translate back to more work ethic and motivation and stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah. What questions do you have for us?
Oh my gosh. I would say, I guess right off the bat, for something that's not political, I'm just interested in your hottest take.
I think I'm so like in the middle of so many things. I don't really have any extremes on either end.
That's wild.
Honestly, I just like people that, as long as they don't hurt anybody.
I just want everybody to be
If
happy.
you're an
honestly.
open thinker, if you're an open thinker with nuanced opinions, you have to have some sort of opinion because the masses are not open-minded thinkers.
I'm not a fan of rent control. I think we need to build more property.
Oh yeah, I mean,
That's crazy.
I
No,
hate rent control.
Yeah.
I don't like. I'm all for people doing what they want to do. Like that. That's it. Like fiscally, I'd say we could cut back. And we could,
And that's
be
also
smarter,
like very
be
common
smarter
sense.
with
And the fact that that's like controversial these days is wild to me. It's like if it takes like 2% of a brain to see like that we are in a terrible, terrible situation.
Yeah.
But yeah. All right, let me think of some other ones that are less
I also
controversial
think
for you, Jack.
depression meds and anxiety meds are overprescribed.
Yeah,
That's also
I do as
extremely
well.
unpopular opinion. And I also think people have way more control over their life than they think so. That's also an extremely
I also
unpopular
think
opinion.
that ADHD is overdiagnosed
I
and
100%
overmedicated.
agree. I 100%
That's, I
agree.
mean, that's,
Yep.
and I think it's screwed up an entire generation.
I was diagnosed with ADD and I took Adderall
yeah.
for like 2 years.
I also think hormonal birth control is bad. I don't think women should be on birth control.
I don't know anything about that.
It's terrible.
Why is that?
Well, it's chemical birth control. So, doctors will tell you like, oh, we can, help your acne. We can do all this. We'll regulate your cycles, but they don't actually regulate your cycles being on the pill. All it does is like chemically disrupt your hormones and stop like needed hormones for your body, not just for your reproductive cycle, but for your full like mental well-being as a woman. It will be disrupted by that. It's artificial. It is chemical. Long-term effects, like a lot of women have a lot of, problems getting pregnant after being on birth control for a long time. It changes who you are attracted to because your pheromones are different and your hormones are all screwed up, and we are naturally so attracted to people based on our biology. And when that is like chemically altered, that takes a toll. Different kinds of birth control. I mean, obviously we see the impact. Like, how does a pill cause you to like, gain so much weight, change so much about your body? Your periods just stop. Like, our periods are not supposed to just stop. Like, that shows a serious imbalance. If you are like an unmedicated, not on hormonal birth control, your cycles are unregulated or you're like not regular, like that's a problem that you go to like a hormone specialist and you fix it because you want to be like that is
It goes back to the biological
hormonal
they
birth
do
control.
So
Yeah.
like the copper IUD is probably the most popular one, but that I recently learned because I've have a lot of friends on that. The way that works is that it they usually say it just keeps it from going in it gets the sperm away, that kind of thing. It actually makes the uterus an inhospitable environment for any kind of sperm and any kind of pregnancy. It is a inflammation of the uterus, but that inflammation is not localized. So when you have a copper IUD, your entire body is inflamed constantly because you have a piece of metal in you. And so it's full inflammation, which is why a lot of women say that they have like they struggle with mental health after, having that. There's a reason why your periods get super heavy. I mean, you get awful PMS. Makes it really, really bad. Usually your iron gets depleted when you have one because you are losing so much blood, more than you need to be. And it does not stop fertilization. And that's the thing that like woke me up, is that you can still have a fertilized egg, and then you have like what was often described to me, it was like kind of a spontaneous abortion of like, it just does not allow the egg to stick. And so that isn't great either. Obviously, I would probably say that that's better than like a hormonal thing that's like screwing with your hormones, but it's still like there really isn't a great option.
Okay.
But I do think that we do not talk to young women enough about, and I say this as a young woman who did not learn any of this, about how to regulate your cycle naturally. Because there are things that, you can eat. There are toxins that we are ingesting and interacting with that screw with women's hormones. We should all be very regular. Like that is how we are naturally designed, so that you can literally track, those 28 days and know exactly when you're ovulating, and you can only get pregnant for 3 to 5, it's really just 3 days in that cycle. And, even if that's not like a 99%, but if you are religiously tracking, if you use other forms of protection, like it's very, very secure. But we don't even teach girls that. Like they don't even know where to start. When I started learning this, I had no clue where to turn, because that was never even presented as an option to me, or something that was so like scientifically modern. Like the FDA has now approved like natural cycles as an actual form of birth control now. It's the only actual non-hormonal, non-invasive form of birth control. And so I would say that I think hormonal birth control is bad. I don't think non-hormonal is much better, even though it's probably better for a lot of people. And I have friends that have had great experiences with the copper IUD. But I just think we need to better equip women, because you literally have no idea how your body works. I had no idea about the hormones that I go through every single month. I had no idea about any of my cycle, and the fact that it is so scientific down to the day that you can regulate it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to know what your most hot take is. I want to see if there's a thing we can disagree on, so we can have some sort of like quasi debate.
I'm anti-death penalty.
I could go either way on that.
Morally, I do think that there are some offenses that I would be, like child rape and that sort of thing. I'm like, castrate the fuck out of you. Like, I do not care.
Yeah.
But the way that this system is set up, I'm anti because of that. Like, there are so many, cases where even if in one case they ruled it wrong and we took a life, like, why are we allowed to play God? Why is a jury or a judge allowed to play God?
Yeah, I would say life is the most precious thing.
Oh, I saw a TikTok on that. It was so sad. The kid was put to the death penalty. I think he was like 16 years old, 17 years old. And then they found out like 40 years later he was innocent.
Oh, that's like a substantial statistic.
Yeah.
And also one thing that I think really struck me is that a lot of people say that it's cheaper, but it's not, because you have to go
so
through
much
years
death
and
row
years.
is years. Yeah, and the
court
litigation
cases.
too.
And the victim's family has to keep coming back.
Yeah.
Like, imagine, something awful happens to your child, your loved one, whatever, and you have to keep going back year after year after year, testifying, doing all of this. It's like, at that point, I just want to get on with my life. Put them behind bars for life.
Oh, how about this? How about assisted suicide? How do you feel on that?
I'm anti it.
Anti?
Yeah.
Why?
And I just, God. So I'm looking at what is happening in Canada right now. And it's happening to the most vulnerable population. So we were talking about like the mentally ill on the street. They're, going up to these people, and that's their solution right now. Is that, if you're so mentally, if you are so unhappy, here's this, state assisted suicide. It's like, that's your best option.
But you go for that. What if someone is terminally ill?
I think that's a totally different conversation.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
So
if you
say
are,
the legality of assisted suicide, not necessarily the culture of it, but the legality of it in general. Like, do you support the theory of it?
I think if somebody was terminally ill, I think that would be the only time that I would be morally for it, like think that it was like legally, maybe okay. I think that would be very hard as like the family member that was watching that or being involved. I don't know how I would react to that, but I also know people who are, there's no other way, and they want to go, at their own, especially like older people who it's like, I don't want to suffer anymore. I can understand that argument. But what really bothers me is that like people are touting this around as like, we're helping all these people, all these homeless people, they don't really have like a point to live. And it's like, that's your option. We're talking about like, what do we do for this, vulnerable population? How do we clean up our streets? How do we make it safer? And it's like, this is what Canada's trying to do. And it's, and I see the videos of people who, have been offered assisted suicide. And it's like, some of them were talking and, they were saying like, if this had been offered to me like a year prior, I would have taken it. And then over the last year, like my life has gotten so much better. I finally, took the leap and I, made all these changes. It's like, that's terrifying to me. But again, it's less of like somebody else playing God. But it's like we're offering that to people as this like
right,
option.
as an
It's like
out.
that's,
Yes.
I don't think that that's like a cop
To
out
mentally
for me on the
challenged,
government.
ill
Yes.
people as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that feels like taking advantage of them. And if that's the best you can do, then I have a real problem with that.
Keep trying.
Yeah.
Come up with some. No, I mean, come up with. Yeah.
Keep trying.
Because I still.
trying, yeah.
What is the goal of going into political commentary? Is it to strengthen the base of the conservative population, or is it to share your opinion and hope to be heard and understood by the other side, the liberals, and maybe change their opinion?
I think it can be both. I don't think it needs to be either or. I was talking about this actually on a live stream yesterday. I think a lot of conservatives get themselves caught up in trying to change people's minds when I think back to, me feeling very alienated as, a college student sharing my opinions, losing friends, that sort of thing. Somebody speaking directly to me and saying, your opinions are not crazy. There are people that, think like you, and being empowered and being told it is okay to speak up. And, having somebody that is unwavering in their values. And I think Matt Walsh is somebody who is incredible at that because he does not bend at all. He is not somebody that's like, I'm not going to find, he says it, I'm not going to find common ground with you, because most of the stuff that he talks about is in regards to his children's lives and that kind of thing. He will not waver. And I think he is incredibly empowering, especially to his audience of parents, of getting them to speak up and say, it is okay to defend your children in this way. It is okay to have this opinion. There are others like you. And I think if we forget the base, and if we are consistently just trying to spend all of our time going out and reaching everybody else, and it's what happens to everybody, here. So I think you kind of have to, I think it's important on both sides. I like to try to do both in my content. And I think that the manner in which I speak and the topics that I speak about make it more palatable for people who disagree with me. And I like that. I like the fact that I look at my comments and I see people disagreeing, but in a healthy way. It's the most inspiring thing to me. And people having healthy conversations in a YouTube comment section is absurd. And I'm that's actually very, very cool. And I like the fact that I see comments where somebody says, I'm more center left, and I actually relate to you on some things, and I've learned a lot, even though I disagree with you on things. I find your content enjoyable. It's that's a huge win for me. But I also look at comments, and at the same level, seeing a 16-year-old kid who's I, live in Los Angeles. Everybody thinks differently than me. I feel so alone, and I hear your content, and I feel empowered not to feel scared to talk about my beliefs. That's a huge win, because I was that kid, and I felt I was totally alone, and everybody around me was crazy, and I did not know who to look up to. And if I can be that for somebody else, then that's also a win for me.
See, the problem that I see with some of the leaders of the conservative and the liberal movements is the fact that they are so aggressive to the other side, and it's constantly shooting down the other side. And I feel if you actually really wanted to make some grounds, and hopefully transfer some people or open up the other side's perspective, you wouldn't be so aggressive, but come from more of a place of compassion and understanding. And that's the one thing that I can't seem to get over as a viewer, because I watch Ben Shapiro, and I also watch Destiny, and I watch Hassan, and I watch you, and I see all of this stuff. I literally watch from both sides, but that's the one pill I just simply cannot swallow. That frustrates the heck out of me when I'm watching content like this. It's if you really care about the end goal of achieving what you want to achieve, and hopefully if you really believe your ideology is better than the other one and you want this ideology to take power, wouldn't the most effective and efficient way to get there to be hopefully transferring some of the people on the other ideology side over to your side? Therefore, people respond very poorly to negative criticism, right? At least in a negative light, right? But they respond very, very well to compassion and understanding. And I feel if the sides could just have a little bit more compassion and understanding to the other side.
I think pride's a big part of it, though. Is imagine someone else comes at you and you're okay, well, maybe, they have some points. You do that, and then everyone questions, well, what about everything else that you said? Maybe you're going to change those beliefs, too. It's if you do that, you lose that
Exactly.
that
So I think
audience
you
as
do
well.
need to be consistent. So I think that the important thing to do is that I don't bend my values to appease anybody else. I don't change my opinions to appease anybody else. But I am very open with my audience. I've talked about Dylan Mulvaney a lot, who's the transgender person who blew up on TikTok now, has 10 million, is a transgender influencer. Talked about them a lot. Very, very controversial. And there's a lot of things they've said that I do not agree with, especially in regards to children. But I am always very open about the fact that I like their personality, and I used to subscribe to Dylan's channel and Dylan's TikTok before he became Dylan, because I thought his content was hysterical and super funny, and he was a great this cute little gay guy and all of this stuff, and very few people on my side of it are willing to acknowledge that. But I watched Dylan's stuff for ages, like all throughout COVID. And I'm willing to say I still have that like fondness, and I want to be compassionate for what Dylan is going through and that sort of thing. But I won't bend or change how I feel about the subject and about the ideas that they are sharing, but I will find a way to have some kind of human connection with the story that I'm talking about. Same way as if I'm like dealing with a celebrity, you know, I will say like, oh, I still like their music, whatever. Like, I will acknowledge the fact that I'm not so black and white that if I hate like a singer's, you know, ideology or things that they will say, I still really like your songs, like that's cool. I am also unafraid to criticize my own side if we're being idiots about something. And I think a big part of that is just criticizing people for absurd stuff, like Emma Watson when she had that really unflattering photo of her taken back in the summer. People were like, this is what wokeism does to you. It's like, no, she's a 30-year-old woman who has not gotten any work done, which I thought that we were promoting, that we didn't want women to be like fake and whatever. She's natural. She got caught in a bad light, and you're now slandering her.
I've never seen the picture.
It was like her like forehead was all like, it was like huge on right-wing Twitter.
Really?
And they were like, this is what wokeism does to you. And they would like put a photo of her from like 10 years ago and then a photo here. And it was like, that, why are you spending your time debating that? Like, you're attacking somebody who has done nothing right now. Obviously, we could have a conversation about Emma Watson's, you know, like hatred of J.K. Rowling, about her policies, but you're going after a woman's looks to have a quick dunk on Twitter and feel good about yourself. And I think being able to criticize your own side when they are genuinely being stupid, I think that humanizes you as well, so that you don't feel so polarized. And I think the best people that I follow and the best mentors I have are willing to do that and are willing to say, you know what, this was actually a win on the left. They did a good job, or something, you know, on the right of like, we royally effed up. And this is not productive whatsoever. Yeah. Because if you are so caught in just winning constantly at the expense of everything, especially winning a quick like click or immediate hit or that kind of thing, it's like, what's the point?
That's the thing. Like, I remember Ben Shapiro, honestly, he kind of went viral and he built his entire career based off of like, Ben Shapiro destroys like, you
facts
know,
and
feminists,
logic.
Facts and logic or something like that. And it's just like some kid walking up to the podium.
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
You know, just completely destroys
My favorite one was the one kid said like, well, how do you know Boy Scouts or boys? And he was like, because it's in the name. Yeah. Not gonna, like, it's like those moments. Yeah.
Yeah. But the only thing is, it's like, okay, obviously for profit, like that makes sense as a business. You got to get the clicks and everything. But I just wish, I'm like, look, he could say something like, look, understanding you're coming from a place of hurt, and it's probably not, and you know what I mean, something like this, and like feeling like he has compassion for the other person, because then he wouldn't have, well, he probably still would, maybe not, I don't know, have these like hordes of people all showing up and like protesting him when he goes to speak at these colleges,
because they want to hear what he has to say. They want to hear those quick comebacks. That's what they come. That's what they come
what he's
for.
known
I know, but I feel like it's like 80-20. Like, you still get like 80% of the value when
it's
you
also
still
hard
like
because you listen to those
destroy
clips
them, but
and
like
you hear those like moments from his things. But if you like listen to like Ben's full like 4-hour freaking show, it's totally different. So I think it is like, you know, in those like quick debate things, like that's the format of them, and they're supposed to be very, very fast. But when you hear him do his like his Sunday special that he does is one of my favorite things, because he usually brings people that he disagrees with, and it's like a 4-hour conversation, and it's the most like respectful, like he truly is compassionate, and he's like the most digestible, relatable person. And I think in that format, but it's hard have
you thought about doing that
with like
bring someone
possibly,
on
we're
who you
working
just
on
like
stuff
disagree.
like that.
I would love to see that.
Because I think that, you know, those conversations are not had very often, but also they're very difficult for short form stuff. They like really lend themselves to long form. You have to spend, you know, over 3 hours with people really diving into it. And that's what, you know, Ben's Sunday special is hours and hours. And what Jordan Peterson does, hours and hours of speaking to people. But most people don't want to sit through and watch all of that. So they only see the clips, and those viral moments obviously bring fame and that sort of thing. But they're viral for a moment or for a reason.
Right.
I just do think that there could be a shift in general for like Daily Wire, other like liberal media companies, to have a little bit more compassion for the other side. I think that there's a huge contingent of people right in the middle. Still, I know it's hard to believe, especially with like how aggressive everybody is on each side and the gravitational pull from each side. But I think there's still a lot of people in the middle, and that could really be claimed by either side if you just came with a little bit more compassion and care for the other side.
I forget how many people were in the middle, but it's like 90% of people are in the middle, but the 10% on either side, they're the ones who really show up to vote.
Yeah.
And so you get like those people really getting together.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree with you. And that's something that I do try to do. And I think that that's something that shows through in my content. And I think that that's why most of my audience is younger, because Gen Z wants that. Gen Z values like emotional connection and that sort of thing more. And there's a reason why I do make a very, very concerted effort to be human when I'm dealing with these stories. And they're all like very personal to me, especially when I'm dealing with like gender ideology and that sort of thing. Like if I get like emotional with those stories, it's because like these are all people I grew up with. Like a majority of my friends from, high school and that sort of thing have either transitioned or are, gay, have literally chopped off their boobs and that kind of thing. Like these are literally friends that I, know. Mm-hmm. And so I'm never going to like scream in their faces and that sort of thing and say, you're not real. But it's like, I will speak out about, my opinions. I won't shy away from that, but I will always acknowledge that it's like, this is still a person. And, if you are going after children, that's a different thing, and I will not pull any punches, and I do not give a shit at all. But if you are an adult, I will still have, compassion for you. You're still a human being. And I think it's just, different strokes for different folks about how, the tone that they use. But I do think that's one of the reasons why my content is effective, especially with this generation.
So with that said, I don't know when the audio cut out. Guys, this has been a super long episode, and we've done something outside of the norm. We want to leave our comfort zones and have on people with very challenging opinions. So with that said, you guys, if you enjoy content like this, please leave a comment down below because we are very excited for our guest coming on next Sunday. That's going to surprise you guys. There's going to be some drama, okay? And let us know if you want more content like this. Graham, you want to do your thing?
Yeah, as usual, make sure to subscribe.
Add me on Instagram at JLet.
And you can get free stock down below in the description.
It'll be linked down below. So thank you guys so much.
All the way up to $1,000 when you make it deposit.
Next time. Dude, wait. Actually, what's your name? Carter. That's a great name. Okay. Carter has been what I've wanted to name my son for the last 10 years. Wow. I've told everybody since I was 11. No, I guess it was maybe 14. I was probably 12 when I made that decision that I was going to name my son Carter. You have a fantastic name, my friend. Thank you, Carter. You're a great guy.
He was around this late.
Everyone shout out Carter. W. Carter. Okay, down in the comments.
Carter.
He did everything, so thank you.
Thanks.